Aloha, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Rob Haak. I'm from the Hawaii Pacific Export Council. We are a nonprofit in Honolulu that is dedicated to helping Hawaii and Pacific Island companies export. And to be very clear, let's define an export is sending a product to a foreign country. It's not sending it to the mainland, but to Canada, for example, or Mexico. A lot of our companies in Hawaii, when they hear the word export, they think of Japan, and that clearly counts as an export. And I think a lot of the panelists that we have today are going to be speaking about their particular expertise in exporting, and that leans a lot towards Japan, as we know that that's where a lot of our companies are interested in exporting. But I'd like to make it clear that just because we're talking about Japan today, all of the lessons that are learned could be directed towards Germany or Brazil or Singapore or Mexico or wherever your exporting will take you. So we're very lucky at the Hawaii Pacific Export Council to be able to put on this series of webinars and seminars and one-on-one company mentoring sessions each year because we receive a grant from DBEDT, who in turn receives a grant from SBA in Washington, D.C. The SBA program is a national program called the HiSTEP grant, or the State Trade Expansion Program. And in Hawaii, that's rebranded by DBEDT to the very clever name HiSTEP. And I've seen over the years, Jamie, you can correct me when your speech comes, but I think we're approaching our 9th or 10th year of the HiSTEP program. And my experience is that this has just been an absolutely fantastic and phenomenal program for our companies in Hawaii, because the HiSTEP program, the HiSTEP program, helps them with various aspects of exporting, which could be just getting involved in exporting for the absolutely the first time, or even for experienced exporters who can learn some things and perhaps move on to a secondary or a third market if they already have experience. Say, for example, they've worked in Japan for a few years and they've been successful, so now they'd like to attempt Korea or China or Taiwan or perhaps Europe. So again, I'm a really firm believer in how well the HiSTEP program has been run, and we really thank DBEDT and SBA for that opportunity. I'd like to share my screen very briefly, and one second. Oops, that was the wrong one. Bear with me. Do you see a website now? This is the website of the Hawaii Pacific Export Council at hawaiiexportsupport.com. I wanted to point out to you that we have a very deep archive of videos, of which you're watching now. This event, Export University 101, will be, we're recording it, and after some editing, I will upload it to our archive here. And I strongly suggest you spend a little bit of time and go through our archive, which is also archived on the DBEDT website, where you can see these videos of all kinds of past exporting related subjects. And before we get started, I wanted to point out the DBEDT website, particularly the HiSTEP sub-site on the DBEDT website. If you go to invest.hawaii.gov and then click on this exporting tab here, it will take you immediately to the HiSTEP program, and you'll see all of the activities that Jamie Lum is going to present about in just a couple of minutes. So with that, I would like to introduce Jamie Lum from DBEDT. She manages the HiSTEP program and can speak to it much better than I can. So Jamie, please.
Thank you, Rob. And mahalo everyone for joining us today for the Export University 101. You can see my slides, right? Okay.
Yes, and audio is very good.
Yeah. There we go. Okay. So thank you again. Thanks, Rob, for the introduction. Rob's given a little bit of the background on our HiSTEP program. So as he mentioned, it is funded primarily through a grant with the Small Business Administration, SBA, nationwide program known as the State Trade Expansion Program, or STEP. And as Rob mentioned, we have been we're fortunate we have one of those state abbreviations that go nicely with STEP. So HiSTEP. I don't know how many. I laugh at the Missouri one because theirs is MoSTEP. So so it sounds a little more colloquial, but it is a nationwide program that we have to apply for funding every year, and it is competitive. But I would say most of the states do have a STEP program, as well as some of the territories. What is HiSTEP? It is an export development program that really helps our Hawaii companies that have Hawaii-made products or services get into the worldwide marketplace. While we are the recipients of these funds and we administer the grant, we do work with many partners, and we couldn't run the program without all of our partners here, such as HPEC. So thank you to Rob, and to actually all of the speakers that you see right now are either currently on the HPEC part of HPEC, or have been on HPEC. So thank you so much. Of course, with the U.S. Commercial Service, we work closely, John Holman, and then the SBA funded partners, such as the Small Business Development Centers, the Women's Business Center, otherwise known as the Mink Center for Business and Leadership, and then our Veterans Business Opportunities Center. And then some of our state agencies that we work with are Department of Agriculture, Innovate Hawaii, which helps manufacturers, and our Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone. So these are our partner organizations that help us in various ways with our STEP program. What we hope to achieve through HiSTEP is that we want to see the dollar amount of exports that are going out of Hawaii to increase. So expanded exports, expanded revenues from exports mean more tax revenues ultimately for the state, more jobs supported, more household income to our residents that are involved. So we also want to see a larger number of companies that are engaged in international, our global marketplace. And then we want to see a higher penetration of countries and regions around the world that are selling our Hawaii-made products and services. So those are our success metrics. In order to be eligible for HiSTEP, and let me just say, HiSTEP is open to a company, whether you're very new to export, just exploring it, or you are a company that's already exporting and looking to expand. It is open to the full spectrum of companies in that manner. To be eligible, you just need to meet the definition of a small business, which according to SBA standards for most industries is a company that has under 500 employees. You have to be in business for at least a year. You have to certify, and this is a self-certification, that you have enough financial resources to be able to export. And finally, you have to be a product or service that is at least 51% value added in the US, or made in the US, or value added in the US. For Hawaii, we do give preference to companies that meet that on Hawaii standards. So that is a Hawaii-made product or service that can meet the 51%. You also, of course, things like be registered to do business in the state with DCCA, and also be registered with our Department of Taxation. And you cannot be on the list of on the federal list of agencies or organizations that are barred from receiving federal funds. So that's the basic eligibility requirements. Those are it. We have three main components of our program. So what we call the HiSTEP export readiness, and the name itself just suggests what it is. And what you are attending today is part of that. This is monthly webinars that we that HPEC, and this is where we work very closely with HPEC. Rob helps us to put programs together on a monthly basis on either export related topics or so such as today we're doing Export University 101. We'll have one on international trade shows or export financing or negotiating agreements or sort of the legal side of doing international business. So some of those e-commerce and international marketing, a whole range of subjects. And Rob pointed out all those videos that are on the HPEC website. It's several years of archived videos of sessions that we've done, and we also have it on our website as well. So and then we also do market specific, so exporting to Japan, exporting to Korea, exporting to Taiwan, Australia, New Zealand. So again, these are resources, and this is information we're trying to get out to companies so that, particularly if you're a brand new company, you're thinking about exporting, but you don't even know what market you want to go into, or what kinds of things you're going to have to think about or deal with. These sessions are meant to give you that kind of information. Part of our export readiness is our one-on-one business advising services. So I pointed out all of our partners on one of the previous slides. So what we do when a company registers for HiSTEP is we will assign one of our partner organizations to your company, and then you'll be contacted and have schedule a one-on-one business advising session. And so with our partners, you can talk with them about where you're at with exporting. Are you very new to exporting? What are your goals? If you've already been exporting, maybe a little bit about how well you're doing, or what are some of the challenges, etc. So these our partners are there to help look at where you're at and maybe suggest what activities may be beneficial for you to participate in as part of HiSTEP, or possibly even not. Could be something outside of HiSTEP, but they're there to help you along. And so with the training sessions, with the business advising services, we're hoping that companies to give a good foundation. If you don't have an export plan, hopefully you will gain enough information to put one together. And by the way, Rob also does a session on export plan writing that we normally do in around August or September, and it's very good. He does a great job. So it helps you put your export plan together, or if you have one already, maybe you might need to revisit it. Maybe it might be time to update it or refine it in some way. So that is export readiness. The sessions that we have are listed on our website, and we do have, I know Rob is still putting together exact dates. We do have the topics we're looking at doing for the year, but as we schedule them, they'll be on our website. And then for those of you that have signed up, you just you know that it's free, and you just sign up on our website. So the second component is our HiSTEP go global. And so these would be activities such as trade shows, such as consumer shows. And we're trying to, again, give companies an opportunity to actually get out into the marketplace and to find buyers and partners. And in some cases, like with the consumer shows, engage with actual customers that may be interested in your product. So what we do is we will purchase the booth space in a particular trade show, and then we will recruit companies to be part of that Hawaii Pavilion. And I would say two main advantages to participating in one of the Hawaii Pavilions. One is we're trying to make it affordable for our small businesses to participate in these very large trade shows. A company going into a show on your own can spend easily $10,000 for the booth space, for the furniture, for those kinds of things. What we do is we subsidize the majority of the cost, and then we do charge a participation fee. So, for instance, for the Food X show that is happening next week in Tokyo, the cost for a company to participate is $1,000. So again, we're trying to make it very affordable for companies to participate in these very large shows. The second advantage I would say is also being part of the Hawaii Pavilion and being part of the Hawaii brand. And that's something that DBED is working on, along with Department of Agriculture, is really trying to establish a more defined Hawaii Made program. But the Hawaii brand is very strong in international markets, particularly in Japan. And so being part of the Hawaii Pavilion in itself is a strong attraction for potential buyers and importers that in that particular country looking for products to be able to bring into their country. So what we'll do is we will put out announcements when we're ready to recruit for trade shows, and then as a company that may be interested, then you would sign up for that. Then lastly, our company assistance program is where you can apply for direct financial assistance. So this we do once a year. So basically the timing is we put the applications out in November, and then they're due in January. And this is done on a competitive basis. So companies apply, and then there's an evaluation committee that will look at your application. So the application consists of an export plan, and that's about 50% of the scoring for your application. So being able to explain what market you want to get into, why did you select that market, what are some of the reasons why your product has an advantage in that market, or why it would be desirable in that market. How are you looking at going about getting your product in the market? Are you going to be working with a distributor? Are you going to be doing e-commerce, or those kinds of things? So we do it once a year so that we can give companies a full year to actually so that they can implement their export plan for that year. So we've already actually given selected the companies that will receive funding for this year. But just remember, November is when we normally put it out, and then you're given about 2 months to respond. And just to give you an idea now, you will get copies of slides for my presentation. What I'm giving you right now is really just a summary. The slides that I gave to Rob that he will send out have more details, but some of the types of eligible expenses that HiSTEP funds can be used for are things like if you want to put an e-commerce website together for international sales, if you need to translate your website for a particular market, or other marketing materials that you may have, If you want to attend a trade show or go on some business mission, it can be used for airfare. It can be used to pay for trade show costs. And it doesn't have to be the trade shows that DBED or Department of Agriculture put together. It can be another trade show, that you feel is beneficial for your company and your product or your service. It can be used for things like with the U.S. Commercial Service, some of their programs that they have, like the Gold Key Service, et cetera. It can be used for if you have a product that needs to be certified, or you need some sort of certification or license to sell it in that particular market, you may have to go through some testing, for instance, if it's a food product or if it's a skincare product. And those can be cost you a couple of $1,000s to go through. So HiSTEP funds can be used for that. So that's just an example of some of the types of eligible expenses that can be covered with HiSTEP company assistance funding. So those are the three components of HiSTEP. If you're interested, I would ask you to go to our website, and here's another screenshot again, invest.hawaii.gov, and you go under the exporting tab to HiSTEP, and you click on registration. And then once you submit your registration form, now registration is free. There's no cost to register, and there's not even any obligation to participate in any of the HiSTEP activities. What we're basically doing is asking you for information about your company, and then from there, after you submit your registration form, then we will assign you to one of our partner organizations, and then you can have your your business advising session, and then you can go forward. And if it's something that you're interested in, if you feel it fits in with what your export plan is, what your export goals are, you can look at some of our Go Global activities, some of the trade shows or consumer shows, or you can look at applying for HiSTEP company assistance for 2026. So I think that's kind of it in a nutshell. There's my contact information, my email address, and also if you don't have my email address, you'll have Rob's. You can always go through Rob. He can forward your questions to me. So, and I'm happy to take any questions now or later. But I do encourage you, if you're interested, to please sign up. And again, you'll get copies of the more detailed slides that I have about HiSTEP. And then you can also find the information on our website as well. So thank you so much. Appreciate all of you attending today and for your attention. Aloha.
Thank you, Jamie. Excellent presentation as always. I'm going to share very briefly your website one more time, and then make sure everybody understands here. Invest.hawaii.gov, click on the exporting tab, and it'll bring you to here. And I assume that most of the people who have attended the event today are already on the mailing list, but if you got this link from a colleague or a friend and you're not on the HiSTEP mailing list, please join it here. Okay, with that, I would like to bring in one quick thing also. I'd like to share our agenda for the day. This event that you're attending, the Export University 101, is an annual event. Most of our events, we change it around every year, and we'll have the same event every 2 or 3 years. But the Export University 101 event has really been a flagship event for us, and we do it early in each HiSTEP cycle. We're now in HiSTEP 2025, obviously, and this is what you'll see. I put this QR code here because if you want to scan that, that will take you to the Dropbox folder where the presentations are that you'll see today. And as Jamie mentioned, after I edit the video and post it, I'll be sending around a link that shows you how to get to this Dropbox folder and see PDFs of the presentations that are there. Here's the link for that. It's the same link as this QR code. So our next speaker will be Susan Utsugi. She's from the Central Pacific Bank, but she's also a board member of the Hawaii Pacific Export Council, and she's our new treasurer, which is wonderful. I'd like to thank her for taking on that role. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and I'm going to bring back Susan's presentation here. And can you see your presentation, Susan?
Yes, thank you, Rob.
Okay, great. And just tell me when you would like me to flip to the next slide.
Oh, great, thanks. So hi, everybody. I'm Susan Utsugi with Central Pacific Bank. I manage our business banking division here, where we work primarily with small businesses across the state. So this is my first time I'm doing this presentation. So thanks to HPEC and Rob for including me. Next slide, please. So if I may just share a little bit about Central Pacific Bank, we were founded 71 years ago by a group of Japanese American Nisei veterans. And, you know, they came back as war heroes, and they were looking to purchase homes, to start or expand their businesses, and they found that they had difficulty getting financing. So they decided to start their own bank, which was Central Pacific Bank. And today we continue to focus on home ownership and small business lending. And so very proud of our heritage at Central Pacific Bank. Next slide, please. So ways to fund exporting. So the assumption is that you're operating today in Hawaii, and or perhaps you're doing some business on the continent, but you want to expand your business internationally by selling your products or services overseas. And so with that expansion, you're going to be growing, and you'll need capital to fuel that growth. And there are several ways that you can fund that growth. We just heard from Jamie that they do have the HiSTEP program, company assistance program. So that's a great way. But you could also look at your current business cash flow to see if you can fund that expansion internally or through your cash reserves. There's a vendor's pocket. So, you know, utilizing terms that you get from your vendors is one way to fund the growth, or investors. However, you know, if you bring in investors, you typically have to give up some ownership in your company. There are also some government export financing programs available. But what I'm going to be speaking about today is conventional business loan or line of credit to finance this growth, and also the SBA Export Express Loan Program. Next slide, please. So basically, there are two types of credit, either a loan or a line of credit. And depending on your plan, which is, you know, as Jamie said, there are a lot of resources out there to put together a plan, and highly encourage you to attend Rob's session on putting together the business plan. But based on your plan, you'll know how much financing you need. And, you know, if you finance it with a loan, there are advantages to that. But I would say that a loan would make sense if it's a situation where you're not going to be able to repay whatever you need for your growth within 1 year, but you're going to pay it over a period of time. So the benefit of a loan is that it's permanent working capital that can cover things that are more long-term. Maybe you need equipment for this export project, or you need to permanently increase your inventory level. So that would make sense to finance it with a loan. A loan is typically 5 years, a 5-year term with monthly installments, and you'll know what your monthly payments are. They'll be consistent over the 5-year period because the interest rate is typically a fixed rate. And typically with loans, there's just a one-time fee for that, for the loan. The disadvantage is that it doesn't revolve like a line of credit. And so once you're funded, as you repay the loan, it just reduces the balance of your loan until you pay it off. Compared to a line of credit, because the payments are amortized over that 5 years, it's typically a higher monthly payment compared to a line of credit. But again, the benefit is that you can pay back that loan over a 5-year period. Next slide, please. So the other option is a business line of credit. And again, that would be typically when your use of proceeds can be repaid. The line can be repaid within a 1-year period. It's really more for short-term working capital. The advantage is that it's available to cover the cost that you need for your expansion, for your exporting, and so you can fulfill your international orders. It'll allow you to, grow your business, and it revolves. And so as you utilize the line and repay it, what you repay becomes available again. So just like a credit card, if you have $100,000 line of credit and you use $50,000, repay the $50,000, that becomes available. So you have $100,000 available again. And the payments can be flexible. Our payments are typically interest for the month, accrued interest plus 1.5% of your principal. So depending on your line usage, that'll determine your monthly payment. And if you don't use a line, of course, you don't accrue any interest and there are no payments. The disadvantage is that sometimes the balance may be due in lump sum. Lines have a term, typically sometimes 1 year. And at the end of the 1-year period, either the full amount is due or you need to repay, or you need to renew the line. We have a line of credit program that is, the line does not expire as long as it's handled in a satisfactory manner, which is a nice thing for business owners because they don't have to renew their line every year. So it really depends. In working with any lender, make sure you understand your terms of whatever you're entering into. So it could be where you do have an annual renewal and it could be canceled. And oftentimes there are annual fees on the line of credit. Next slide, please. So the SBA, Small Business Administration, has an Export Express loan program. And we are looking to start offering this program next quarter. And so these are the terms that are offered under the SBA export line or the loan. And the loan proceeds can be used for the purpose of when you're getting ready to export. And so as you're doing your due diligence, any costs incurred, that can be used. That's an eligible purpose for this loan. So loan amounts are up to $500,000. The SBA will guarantee the loan, and so 90% guarantee for loans up to $350,000 or less, and then 75% guarantee for loans more than $350,000. So what that means is that it allows the bank to take a little bit more risk than it might normally do because of the government guarantee. Depending on the loan amount, the interest rate on the loan can range. It's based on the Wall Street Journal Prime plus a margin ranging between 3% to 6.5%. Right now, the Wall Street Journal Prime today is at 7.5%. There is collateral to secure the loan. Typically, at minimum, it is security interest in the business assets. And then depending on the overall loan, the collateral, there may be additional collateral as deemed necessary. So the credit decision is an SBA guaranteed loan, but you work with a bank, you work with a lender, and they're going to apply their underwriting criteria and make the credit decision. Just for your information, the SBA does also have international trade and export working capital program for loans up to $5 million. Next slide, please. So the loan process. I think first it's sharing your exporting plan with your banker. So, the sooner the better. Rob and I were just talking about this. And, if you're thinking of exporting, it's good to start socializing it with your banker so that they can also be involved early on and help you plan, putting together a business plan, especially if this is something that you've not done before, and you're going to be relying on projections where you don't have a track record with exporting. So your business plan would include your funding need, what you're going to be using the loan proceeds for, and then financial projections that would show how much revenue will increase, what your expenses will be, and how much profit you'll be making through exporting. And great to know that Rob has training on putting together a business plan. So highly encourage you to look for that. And then also the Small Business Development Center is another good resource. They can help you refine your business plan as well. Within your plan, also, current financial statements are crucial. So having financial statements that are current and accurate that your banker can use is part of the business plan and the overall process. So based on your discussions with your banker, they will recommend the type of financing that makes the most sense for you. And I do want to share that Central Pacific Bank, we have a new online portal for small business loans. We just launched that at the end of last year, and we're the only local bank currently that has an online portal to apply for a business loan or line. So you can go in 24/7 at your convenience, from your office or from your home, and apply for business credit. Some of the things that you should be prepared to provide, having your entity documents, ID information, 2 years of your business tax returns, 2 years of your personal tax returns, and a personal financial statement. Typically, the bank will require anyone that owns more than 20% of the company to personally guarantee. So each of those parties would need to provide their personal tax returns and personal financial statement. And then just other things to be aware of is when the bank takes collateral, which is the security interest in your business assets, they will make sure you have insurance for your business personal property, general liability, and name the bank as loss payee. So be prepared to have that assurance available. And then also going back to business plans and projections. The more detailed information you have in your business plan, it does really help go through the process. Next slide.
Susan, I'm glad you brought that up about the business plan. So what I do every year is have through the HiSTEP program is a workshop to develop an export plan, and the export plan becomes very detailed by the end of the process. And then our companies that go through that workshop, they put that into their overall business plan. And I think that it has been a successful program that we've done the past few years. So I encourage everybody to look for that event coming up. It'll be usually in September. And it's usually 2 separate days or, a few hours each day of the workshop. But it's one event where we'll go through the template of how to write the export plan. And then you have a month to do your homework and actually fill out the export plan. And then we come back a month later and go through it and refine it and get it ready to be submitted either to DBEDT for company assistance, or in this case to the bank as part of your business plan for a loan or whatever you would need.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rob. So the 5 C's of credit, these are the 5 things that fundamental things that the bank will look at in reviewing and approving your credit request. So I'll just go over each one briefly. The first one is character. And that is oftentimes, or all the time, the bank will look at your individual personal credit score. Character is the propensity of the borrower to repay the loan in good or bad times. And so the personal credit score does have a pretty heavy weighting when it comes to this category. And as I mentioned, every owner that owns 20% or more of the company are required to personally guarantee the loan. And so each guarantor's personal credit score will be taken into account. Another thing is just the owner's knowledge and their experience in the industry that the business is in. Second is capital. So capital is how much personal cash and investment the owner has into the business. how much does the owner retain in terms of profit in the business? So the net worth of the company. Banks like to see that the owner has skin in the game and is leaving profits in the company. So capital is something that is considered. Capacity is the ability to cash flow. So cash flow, all of the expenses of the company, as well as annual debt service. So the annual loan payments on behalf of the company, and even looking at it on a global basis. If the loan is, the business is 100% owned by one person, and the business profits are the primary income of that person, the bank will look at a global cash flow as well to make sure that the bank's profitability can cover the owner's debts as well. Next is collateral. So collateral is what secures the loan and is a secondary repayment source. So if worst case scenario, the business cannot repay the loan, the bank will look at the collateral that is taken to cover what's the balance of the loan. And it could be assets of the business, like we talked about. Typically a security interest in business assets is standard collateral, or in some cases it could be personal assets of the owner. And then lastly is conditions. So conditions include things like the industry, what's happening in the industry, how risky the industry may be at that time, the economy, other external factors that will impact the business in a positive or negative way. So that's basically your standard items that a bank will review in looking at a credit request. Next slide, please. So, supporting small business in our community for Central Pacific Bank is important. And, HPEC and HiSTEP. HiSTEP is funded by the SBA. And I'm really proud to share that, Central Pacific Bank has been recognized as SBA Lender of the Year 16 times since 2004. So just yesterday, we had an awards ceremony with the SBA, and all of the banker awards were given to bankers that are with Central Pacific Bank. And so we really take, this seriously, and we see the SBA program as a way to help more businesses gain access to capital and grow. We have small business resources, Rising Tide. So if you go to risingtidehawaii.com, you can see the kind of resources that we offer, which includes things like quarterly webinars. We have some recording of our webinars on the site. And then we also like to highlight some of our members, and we offer information to the small business community and other resources that are out there. And under that, we have a We by Rising Tide program, which is a Women Entrepreneurs program. We stand for Women Entrepreneurs. And this is a program, it's a 10-week program by application. We partner with the Passy Teaming Center for Business and Leadership, which is a women's business center. They help facilitate that program. And so it's an application process, and 20 women-owned businesses are selected. Minimum criteria to apply is that you're 51% women-owned, have been in business for 3 years, and have minimum annual revenue of $250,000. And within the program, what is offered is financial management classes. The first 4 weeks are focused on financial management. We also focus on marketing, a lot of networking. We have one session that's a speed mentoring session where we bring in 20 subject matter experts. And in fact, Jamie Lum is one of our subject matter experts. And so women can have access to expertise within the community to help them grow their business. Next slide. So that's basically all I have. So thank you for your attention. I went through this on a very high level, so I welcome any questions that you may have.
Great. If anybody has some questions, please type them into the chat or the Q&A function of Zoom. And in the meantime, I did get texted a question. Let's say, Susan, if you have a company who's just thinking about getting involved in exporting for the first time, and they would like to start this process of an SBA export express loan program. How do you even begin? Like, where would they go to just kick it off?
To apply for the loan or to
Yeah.
do?
Yeah, to apply for the loan, or I know that on SBA.gov they could find more information, but how would they get something going if they
Yeah.
and typically how long does it take to actually get a loan, assuming they meet some of the 5 C's they pass?
So I would have them speak to their banker. If they don't, if hopefully they have someone that they work with. If not, go into a branch and ask to speak with a business banker or somebody that can help them with small business lending, and let them know that they're interested in the SBA export loan program. We are going to start offering that next quarter. So one way is to speak with someone directly, or another way is through our website. We will have the online portal for small business loans, and the SBA Export Express loan will also be offered via that online portal. So cpb.bank.
Great. Great. So when you say next quarter, that's coming up in just a couple of weeks. The second quarter, is that what you mean, or do you mean the third quarter?
Second, so probably I would say May or June.
Great, 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 great. I'm really glad to hear that. I think that our Hawaii companies need more access to this this program. Okay, let's see, I don't see any questions unless I'm missing something. Wait, there is one here. Oh, okay, John Burslin is here. That's great. Thank you. Okay, with that, Susan, I'd like to thank you very much for being here. And I would also mention, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't tell the attendees, I've seen a lot of our companies fall down because they did not work on this banking relationship ahead of time. And Susan and I were talking about this briefly before the webinar kicked off, and that I think it's really important for our companies to establish a relationship with a bank and with a banker and go in and talk to the bank about your plans. You don't have to have it completely formalized yet, but at least get that relationship going and say, it's quite possible that I'm going to be entering the Japanese market, for example, and here's what I'm thinking. This is about what my product costs, and I could imagine a customer in Japan buying 1 or 2 pallets of these products, and this is what the packaging might look like, and we would need some help financing this purchase. And so there's a lot of options there, but if you don't know that ahead of time, you may make some decisions later that are probably not in your best interest. And the more you know about what is available from your bank and your banker, the better off you'll be when the time comes to actually need it, because there will certainly be paperwork involved. And if you can get that done, a lot of it ahead of time, or at least know what the paperwork is that you need so you can start preparing those documents, it makes things go so much smoother and faster. So again, thank you, Susan. We greatly appreciate you being here. And now we will move to our next speaker. Just going back to our agenda real quick. Again, scanning the QR code will take you to where these presentations are housed on a Dropbox folder in PDF format. Our next speaker is Kanzo Nara. He's from QP Hawaii in the I Do Web School. I love having Kanzo-san as a speaker because he's incredibly knowledgeable about multilingual websites, multilingual social media, and what needs to be done to market your products internationally. He's well-versed in Japan, originally from Hokkaido, but has lived in Hawaii for a very long time. And I think he can really help bridge a cultural gap, the language gap, and then for people who are not tech oriented, he can certainly bridge the technology gap with that as well. So with that, I'd like to invite Kanzo Nara to start presenting his talk.
Thank you, Rob, for the kind introduction. It's always a pleasure to be here at HiSTEP. Without further ado, I'd like to jump into the IT portion of today's seminar. Okay, so today we'll be going over multilingual websites and social media trends for 2025. I'm sure by now most people have a website already, but what we're going to be focusing on today is multilingual websites and multi-regional websites and how they are different. A multilingual website is a website basically just, it's bilingual or trilingual. You have it in different languages. But multi-regional is where you kind of cross borders within the same country and sometimes too. So you want to make sure who you're making your website for. Okay, this is another fundamental of websites. Everybody has a domain, I'm sure by now, for their company. But a lot of times when companies are expanding and they want to start a new Korean website or a Chinese website, the very first step they take usually is the wrong one. And I'm going to cover that right now. So most people already have a .com, but when you're making a new website, what you do not want to do is, if you look at the bottom of this slide, you have the slash and then the JP after that, or KO or CN if it's Chinese. A lot of people do this because you already have a website and you can work within one website to make it look like it has different languages. Unfortunately, this is not what Google's guidelines is recommending. Google guidelines recommend that you have a totally different website for that different language. So when the search robots come to your website, they can differentiate what target is supposed to be looking at your website, in what country and what language. So by doing that, you want to go with these two, which is the .co.jp or the country you're targeting. Or you can do a subdirectory, which you add a domain name in front of your main domain. Okay, this is kind of heavy detail, but this is directly from the developers google.com section on how you are supposed to set up a multilingual website. So if you're interested, please have a look. So getting started with e-commerce, I'm sure many of you already have a website, maybe even a shopping cart, but we're just going to cover the fundamentals. The three main types of e-commerce right now is, number one is having it on your own website. You have your own server, security, you need to get compliant to have credit card processing, SSL certificates. So this is a more of a high tier on e-commerce, but if you want to go for customized business flow, this is a good way to go, especially from the ground up. When you work with different platforms, you have to follow their guidelines, which we'll be jumping into next, which is like a third-party system. This one would be things like Shopify or Wix, where you set up shopping carts, but you have to follow their guidelines within their platform. The third one is online markets. So this isn't actually having your shop or a website, but you will be a vendor within a big shopping mall. So popular ones here in the US and Europe are Amazon. In Japan, it will be companies like Rakuten or ZOZOTOWN. And these are a really good place to get started. So, I mean, if you want to start small and see how you're doing, these online markets are an excellent place to get started. Okay, we already kind of covered this, but the first one is creating your own website. You can highly customize it to your target, have different checkout flows, add options. If you want to get really creative and you're comfortable with IT and coming up with new ideas, this is definitely the way to go. The second one is subscribing to a third party like Shopify. And the third option is becoming a vendor on one of the large platform markets like Amazon. Okay, so here in the US, like I mentioned before, the number one guys are Amazon, but in Japan, it's actually different. In Japan, the number one shopping mall right now is Rakuten. They made $40.5 billion in revenue last year alone. Amazon is a little bit more than half, but at 24 billion. And then we have Yahoo Japan, Yahoo Shopping, and ZOZOTOWN. So, just because Amazon is, doing well here in the US and Europe, depending on the market you're going to, like Hong Kong, Taiwan, you want to make sure you choose the correct online mall for you. Okay, we'd like to jump into website design a little bit here. When we're looking, especially this is big for the Asia market, Korea and Japan and China. It's very heavy content, and that's because a lot of them use Chinese characters, and you can condense information a lot more than like English. And a lot more visual ads, which is called banner ads in Japan, is used. So you has a lot of the websites have kind of a magazine feel to them. And I will go through a few examples with you. Okay, first one is US web design. This is McDonald's USA. These guys have actually kept their layout for about 5-6 years, which is interesting. They really don't play around with their layout, and they kind of stick with this simplistic view. The second one is India web design, India's McDonald's page. This is even more simple. They just have their logo and a welcome message. Now we'll be jumping into Japanese web design. This is McDonald's Japan. And right off the bat, you can see there's so many banner information and pricing and sales and promotions. The section you see right now is actually a rotating banner. So there's about 7 slides that move here every couple seconds. So you can just kind of grasp the amount of information a user is getting the moment they log onto this website. Some more examples. This is the Chinese McDonald's website. Very kind of similar to the Japanese one. This is also a rotating website that has information continuously moving around and around. So they really want to feed information to the user and tell them what's promotional, what's on sale. Compared to the US and India one, whereas users are kind of allowed to search for information on their own. This one is more promoting information. This is just a slide I like to put in when it comes to international branding. This is the Red Cross here in US and Europe, which goes with the left one, the cross that everybody knows. But if you go to the Middle East, the Red Cross actually uses they use the crescent moon to brand their information. So just by like branding and logos, you want to be sensitive towards the market you're using. You never know what tiny symbolisms might have a different meaning in the target you are going into. So in marketing, we'll be talking a little bit about SEO and then focusing more on pay-per-clicks and social media. Breaking down marketing into 3 parts will be pay-per-clicks, SEO, and social media. The first one, pay-per-clicks, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, such as Google Ads. But just like before on the market of the shopping malls, depending on what market you are or even the gender or age audience, you might want to advertise on a different platform. So instead of spending a lot of money on Facebook because you're familiar with Facebook, your users could be on Instagram or YouTube. So clarifying which audience to speak to, which really maximizes the budget you have for advertising. SEO is natural content. So this is the actual information on your website and writing business blogs, product blogs, promotional blogs, anything that is organic on your website will be considered SEO. And obviously in the long run, SEO will do you better than pay-per-clicks. And social media, we will get into with more detail later on. These are e-commerce sales by country. The ranking has pretty much stayed the same since 2023. Germany and France kind of switched places over the past year. China is doing very, very well on e-commerce. They are up to $3.2 trillion in spending. I'm sorry, this should be 2024 at the top, apologies. United States was from 1.07 trillion to 1.1 trillion. We saw a little bit of growth. UK increased to 195 billion. Japan increased to 193 billion. South Korea almost doubled up to 147 billion. India is increasing too, and Germany following. These are global spending projections, and I'm sure Rob is probably pretty sick of looking at this graph already because I've been talking about this for about 5 years. But the projection has been very accurate. You know, they've really been on the money how projections are going. And if you look at 2025, 2026, 2027, there is a very steady growth in e-commerce right now. And the earlier you get in, going back to the marketing portion, you will spend less on your advertising and get more benefits down the road. So if you have e-commerce and you want to expand now, you will get more benefits from it by doing it sooner rather than later. Okay, so social media and advertising. So big data, who are your customers? One of the big thing with social media, I'm sorry, before that, the social media portion is they have a lot of metadata. So they can target audiences more specifically. So before going into social media, you know, search engine optimization is something that is a must for every website now, in whatever language you're doing. You can't just go for keywords that you think are good. You really need to do your homework on this and find out what audiences are typing in what keywords to find your product. Not the keywords you want your customers to find, but what they're actually typing. A good example is your product might be medically sophisticated and you want to use professional wording, but layman's term, people will just be looking, you know, skin cream that's good for acne, things like that. So you want to have layman terms in there to supplement your professional wording into your website. So SEO, I'm sure you're familiar with link building. You want to have good content so people link share with you. A few things to succeed is writing blogs, of course, in the language that you're after. Scheduling updates. This is true for social media too. If you want to grow your audience, you need to have a plan on frequency of updating your information. If you update more frequently, the search engine visits your site more often. On average, the search engines visit your site every 3 to 4 weeks, if you're lucky. If you have a dormant website, sometimes you don't get scrolled for 6 months or so. If you have a very successful website, I'm going to bring up an example such as the New York Times. The New York Times has their website scrolled every 2 hours almost. Sometimes they even get scrolled every half an hour. So depending on the content that's published, Google wants to make sure they're getting every new information they can from that website. So the more you update, the more frequently your website will get scrolled and more information will be available to users when they search for it. We touched on this a little bit before, is keywords. So when it comes into different languages, such as Japanese, Korean, or Chinese, they use different styles of writing. So you can't just put keywords into, like, let's say ChatGPT and tell them, you know, what's the best way to say facial cream or Hawaii t-shirts or, you know, macadamia nut chocolates. It's going to give you the most generic, professionally sounding word, but it might not be correct for the average consumer. So you want to talk with somebody who's multilingual, who understands the culture when coming up these keywords. Otherwise, you might be spending too much money on, let's say, a pay-per-click for a keyword that's not even used. It might be grammatically correct, but the users aren't really searching for those keywords. Another part of pay-per-click and search engine management for, you know, we're going to use Japan as an example, is the big one I like to focus on is time of day. I know most people are familiar with online marketing and you go after location and gender, even age, depending on the platform. But time of day is somewhere where you can maximize your budget as well. Like in Japan, a lot of the population, about 25 to 28% or so, commute over an hour a day, meaning they spend an hour in the morning, hour in the evening on public transportation. And what do? They use their smartphones. So depending on that, you can focus your advertising on that time. And unlike here in the US, Japanese workers, you know, sarariman, they don't really have the luxury of, you know, I'm taking a coffee break right now, I'm gonna search for where I want to go vacation next, what hotels to book. They're a lot more strict in their professionalism in the workplace. So lunchtime, commute times tend to be a real high marketing time for your website. And how pay-per-click works is you choose the sufficient keywords that apply to your service or your product. You set your budget, and then you start optimizing. The optimizing portion is, like I mentioned before, you want to focus on times. If you're targeting younger people, you can figure out when they're looking online. You can adjust this as you go along. And one of the interesting parts about pay-per-click on social media is they have a lot more metadata than, let's say, just the generic search engines like Yahoo, Bing, or even Google. Because most of the time on your phone, you're already logged in to these platforms 24/7. So they have they actually have a lot of detailed information on what you're looking for. Some apps even listen on conversations you're having. Like, let's say you're talking about somebody famous or the TV show you were watching last night. The next day, you might see an ad pop up with that actress or actor that you were talking about promoting a new line of shampoo. So they have a lot of information they can work with. And if you know how to crunch the data in your accounts, we can advertise more sufficiently to the target audience that they're looking for. This kind of piggybacks off of what we were talking about popular online malls for different countries. We're going to be comparing global versus Japan for social media platforms. In Japan, the #1 social media is a media called Line with 96 million, and Facebook global has 2.4 billion, but in Japan, Facebook is actually ranked #5. And you can see #2 is YouTube, and #3 is different than global. Instagram is different than #4, WeChat globally. So depending on what market you go into, Korea, China, Japan, or other Asian countries, you want to focus on your demographic and what platforms you want to invest your time on creating. And another big social media platforms is video marketing now, YouTube and TikTok. Especially TikTok has been in the news very much recently. And the reason being is it's a powerful tool to use. So if you want to utilize your website and maximize more visits, you definitely want to start investing your time and content into video marketing. The biggest video marketing right now will be actually shorts. So instead of creating, let's say, a 3-minute promotional video on your company and your services on YouTube, 30-second video on TikTok will likely have about 800% to 900% more viewers than your traditional YouTube video. And creating new short videos is becoming a new artistic platform, and it's really about focusing sporadic short informations on quantity basis. So this is very interesting, and it's going to continue to grow. And one of the reasons why people and companies in the US are more interested in TikTok and short videos. I always like visiting this section about video media platforms. There was a big shift during COVID. Everybody was staying home, and YouTube viewing just skyrocketed during this period. And one of the interesting things was it brought the baby boomers into YouTube. Right now, there is a humongous amount of baby boomer generation people who are looking at YouTube's, who never really, looked at it before. They used to think there was only like funny cat videos and people goofing around, but they actually realized that, oh, there's real news here. There's nostalgic footage from back in the 80s or 70s. So they are looking to get more information on YouTube and video platforms. And it's really encouraging to see that this demographic has now joined the video media platform. So tying this into your website, you definitely want to have video content ready, available on platforms, but you also want to integrate that into your website. Okay, this is going back to the social media advertising portion, but you want to make sure when and where people are looking at your website or your advertising keywords. Like I mentioned before, they might be on the train or the bus in transit. They might be having a lunch break. Once they search for your products, your service, I want to eat here for lunch when I'm in Hawaii. I want to buy this souvenir when I'm in Hawaii. They look for that and while they're in transit and lunch. And then in the evening, they actually plan for it, or they might even purchase in the evening. So you want to make sure you're advertising at the correct time and make sure they're finding your website at the appropriate time. The next thing is we covered the website as a whole on a previous section. Here, I like to focus more on creating landing pages. This has significantly changed in the past decade because of smartphones. Before, you used to sit on a laptop, in a quiet environment. You would visit a website, and once you're on that website, you will go to their services page, their product page, about us page, company philosophy page. You would visit about 3 to 5 pages on average. Today, users search a keyword in Google, and they will click on your website, but if they don't find that within the first 2 seconds or 2 swipes, they're going to leave that website and go back to the Google search. They're not going to bother to see, oh, maybe it's at the bottom of the website, or maybe it's on their product list, it's on their directory page. They don't really go into the second, third interactions of your website anymore. So you want to have a good landing page, which is landing page optimization. I'm going to cover this again. 2 seconds to grab user attention. You want to make sure it's 2 swipes and your message is within that 2 swipes. So your customers are very busy. They're ordering lattes at Starbucks while walking with their smartphones. They're getting into their car. They might see your website, but maybe only for 2 seconds. So you want to make sure you grab their attention within that 2 seconds. I'm sorry, it used to be a lot longer. You used to have a minute or 2 on the website, but now it's down to 2 seconds. Okay, so now we got all this information out there. We got our website, we got e-commerce going, we got social media, we have pay-per-clicks, and how does this all work out? You want to make sure you analyze this data and understand which direction to take your website next. And that's where the analytics data comes in. So how is your website growing? How can I utilize it? So you want to look at your organic searches, you want to look at how much advertising you spend, and then you want to tie it up with your analytics data as a whole to see how you did this quarter, how you're going to do next year, and so on. Google offers a very nice service for free. It's called Google Analytics, and I'm sure many of you already know it or use it. But their data information is highly sophisticated, and depending on what you're looking at, you see all this information, but sometimes it's hard to analyze. So you want to make sure you talk with a specialist and set up things like goals within your analytics. You want to set out count conversions. This is actually after you set your goal for your website. You want to sell macadamia chocolate souvenirs to Japan and Korea. You set up your goal on your website and you tie it up with Google Analytics, and then you want to start counting your conversions. So based on this, you can use like Google Ads AI to increase your conversions, which are sales. So you can effectively tell Google Analytics and your pay-per-click to talk with your website and find out what users really want from your website. But to do that, you need to make sure they're communicating with each other, and you can have a successful website this way. Okay, there's a few things you can do to make your website more multilingual or globalizing your e-commerce website. The first one is very straightforward. You want to have a currency converter. One of the nice things about doing business here in the US is a lot of people are, a lot of consumers are already familiar with the US dollar. So they feel more comfortable shopping in their own currency. But if you look at multilingual websites or multi-regional websites, like I mentioned before, let's say you are selling to French Canadians living in Canada. You might want to have a different currency in there so that they can more easily shop based on the currency they're comfortable with. So depending on your website, you might want to make some adjustments and implement currency converters for your customers. This is pretty straightforward too, but you want to have good language support. There's a lot of interesting features out there that can help you sustain this language support. without having a bilingual staff. My company actually does a lot of short-term consulting with our clients who need maybe just a couple hours of help per month. They might have a comment on social media. They might get an email from a possible wholesaler in their country, and they want to make sure they reply in a professional mannerisms. So you want to make sure you can cater towards the business end, the B2B section of your website. Okay, here's my my favorite part coming into 2025. 2024 we seen a lot of growth. 2023 people were kind of like, oh, what's this? You see it in the news, but 2025 it's really happening now. And I heard IT economists talk about this on the news the other day. He was saying that AI is not going to replace your work. People who can use AI is going to be replacing your work. So you don't need to worry about AI taking over. It's whether or not you can implement AI. And here are a few ideas of how to automate your work using AI. So when you're posting to social media, I'm sure you spend significant time posting on different platforms, but did you know you could use your website to write something, and then when you post it, you can have AI post it to all your social media. You can create newsletters based on the content information gathered on your website to issue automatic newsletters. You can send review reminders to customers automatically a couple days after they purchase your product using AI. You can do email data collection, which you can tell AI to pick up certain keywords within the emails that you receive to generate a different kind of response based on that person. There is, amazing amount of ways you can implement AI just on a daily basis. Something that took you 4 hours to do will take you 4 seconds. Work that used to take 3 days might be just 3 hours to do. And this is something important to do, especially if you're a small, mid-sized company. You have 8 people, you can't just hire 2 additional people to do this extra work. What you can do is have these 8 people work like you have 45 people using AI. You have to identify the tasks they're doing and make sure how to make it smarter and better. This is a very good one to have if you're just starting up a new multilingual website and you don't have a bilingual staff. We can set up an AI chatbot for you based on Q&As that you've had for the past couple years. We will feed that to the chatbot. Basically what we do is it's kind of like training your dog. We train your AI bot to reply to your multilingual capabilities when customers ask a question. If you have a t-shirt company and it's taking longer and they want to find out where their t-shirt is, we can feed information to the chatbot to help the customer find out where their t-shirt is without actually going to one of the staff. And the more you use it and the earlier you use it, the chatbot will start improving its response time and give you better responses. So you don't want to have a successful website right away and then just fall apart because you don't have good support. But if you have this AI support system built in and you have a successful website 2 years later, then the chatbot can really help you out and make sure your customers don't feel nervous about a product not arriving or not sure what's going to happen with customs if they need to pay for something. The chatbot can make the user feel comfortable that their product is safely going to arrive to you. This is another one that I think a lot of you probably already have kind of played around with is AI content creation. You can create content for your website in multiple languages. You can add tone, keyword ratios. You can really boost up your website just by using your content that, let's say, that was dormant from 3 to 5 years ago that you created for your website. You can recycle it and improve it and keep on making it better. This is a new service that our company started last year that's very popular with. Actually, most of our customers are going with this right now, is an AI website builder. So what this does is it creates a web page for you within a matter of minutes based on the prompts you give it. Let's say you own a health food company and you have a store and you want to have a front page showcasing your prominent products, you can tell it how to make it and what information you want, and it will actually even create the content for you. It will create a layout with no code. It will generate images for you and even do SEO for you. And I'm sure many of you are wondering, hey, if you have AI, what do I need Kanzo for anymore, right? Well, the thing is, once you have it, you can start playing with it and it keeps on learning from you. But what we do is we implement this for you to get you started for, and then you can start creating pages all on your own. So this is a highly sought after tool if you really want to grow your website in a long term instead of continue paying maintenance services, redesigns, switching from an old PHP version to a new PHP version. This will continually update and it will learn from your website too. So the more information you feed it and the more content you write on it, the next time you prompt it to make something new, it will learn from what you've been telling it to do and create even better content. So it just continues to grow with your business. And that comes to the conclusion and end of my presentation. Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you everybody for listening. Once again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. My contact information is in the presentation here, which Rob was telling about, so you can download and get information there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kanzo-san. That was great, as always. If anybody has any questions, please put them into the Q&A. There's a lot of great information there from Kanzo. And if you have any questions about multilingual websites or the social media, any of that, please reach out to Kanzo and visit him anytime. He's amenable to meeting with anybody who has questions about this topic. Okay, great. With that, thanks again, Kanzo. There's no questions here, but I'm sure somebody will be sending some questions to you soon.
Okay, thank you, Rob.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Brian Suzuki from Hawaii Air Cargo. Brian, can you unmute?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, great.
Okay,
and do you want me to control your slides or do you want to do?
Yes, can you control it?
Sure, let me bring up your presentation. So as I talked about earlier with the banking, I feel strongly the same way with regards to the logistics part of the export process, that I really strongly feel that our companies need to be contacting the shipping companies, the logistics providers. In this case, Hawaii Air Cargo is a great example, to talk to them about what it is you're trying to ship and bring them a sample of your product and what is specific about your product. Does it need to be shipped through an air-cooled system, temperature-controlled system, such as chocolate or potentially some sunscreens or creams or these types of things? And somebody like Brian Suzuki has decades of experience and can help you save a lot of time and energy and money by explaining some of these things to you from the beginning. So with that, Brian, please go ahead and just tell me when you would like me to go to the next slide.
Can you put this slide into the main frame? Right now I'm getting several shots, I'm not sure.
Okay, what are you seeing?
I'm seeing one shot in the previous screen.
Okay, bear with me 1 second here.
By the way, I listen to Kanzo every time. I never cease to learn anything, so many things new, and it's really interesting. So hopefully, you know, my subtopic is kind of old. I've been at this airport for 57 years now, and I always say that I'm lucky that we live in Hawaii. On the other hand, for shipping goods, we only have ocean and air. But there are some good things. Okay, from here, can you go to the slideshow? Okay,
this-
there you go.
Okay,
There you go. Next slide. I was saying that, you know, we live in the middle of the Pacific. Great to live in Hawaii, but we have only air and ocean, no railroads and no highways. And but we have a lot of good things because of Hawaii. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. We have all these carriers, ocean carrier. Next slide. And Young Brothers, of course. We have ocean containers, and we have. Go ahead. Next slide. I'm going to go through fast. These are multimodal ocean and air, ocean and land. We have these. You can look up here. Nobody looks at yellow pages, but these are a few companies that are still doing ocean trade in Hawaii, from steamship companies to freight forwarders. Next slide.
Brian, can you take a second and explain to companies who are new to exporting, what is a freight forwarder and what is a broker, a customs broker?
A good question. An air freight forwarder, for instance, or freight forwarder is someone that does everything as, let's say, you're doing surface. They act as an ocean steamship company, but they don't have their own boats or ships. Same way with an air freight forwarder. They do everything like an airline, but they don't have their own planes. An air freight forwarder would use all the scheduled carriers. A surface forwarder would use all the ocean forwarder things. And some of the things, like for instance, you go to a Matson and you want to ship a container, a shipment to anywhere in the system, they won't take small shipments. You got to go to a consolidator like a freight forwarder that might build a container made up of several different shipments. So people always get confused. The only thing is that as a freight forwarder, you have a lot of, I guess, avenues. Surface, you can have all, you know, all the different shipping companies. I know all the air companies, airlines, and so we do. By the way, before I go further too, freight forwarding normally is somewhat controlled or regulated, but air freight, air cargo, airlines, the plane tickets in the U.S., it's not regulated. The airlines or freight forwarder, air freight forwarder can charge whatever the market would bear. Because of that, what I'm telling you today, it's more important that you shop around. And I'll touch on how to shop around, because people don't realize that price per kilo, price per pound, big difference. So you have to know what the person is offering or the company is offering. So let's go to the next slide. This is air. We have airlines, and continue. Next slide. These are all the passenger, all cargo airlines. All cargo means they don't carry passengers. They just carry cargo. And we're fortunate to have several of those, because when I say, for instance, shipments coming in from Japan, going or from China, Japan, going to US, there's a lot of shipments. But the flights that the airlines provide over the Pacific is so crammed with freight that a lot of them, the overflow has to come via Hawaii. So the freight coming on the flight coming from Tokyo to Honolulu, for instance, it'll come full of cargo. And when it gets to Honolulu, since they don't fly beyond Honolulu, they turn it over to United, American, Delta, etc., to get it to the destination. That's they call it the Hawaiian Express, so that the customer might not know, but it might take a day longer than flying on a direct flight, but at least it gets to destination. So going back to the air freight forwarder, he's looking at all the different things now coming in. I said that the carriers are coming in fully loaded with cargo. Every flight, even though passenger loads from Japan is, you're lucky you can get 50%. But thanks to ANA, ANA now is offering some very low rates to Hawaii. So the Japanese public is starting to come back. The yen is weak, but then the ticket cost is lower. A lot of people are starting to move. But anyway, the hardest thing for a person manufacturing Hawaiian product is to sell somebody in Asia that that it's still cheap to fly or to ship your product or their product. What happens is that when the plane comes in full of cargo going back to Asia, we don't ship much. We have very little commodities to send out. So the flights of going back in the cargo loads are empty. So now all the airlines are now trying to get whatever ounce of freight they can get to help pay for the fuel. So they come up and get some good offers. So I get people say, you know, it's a 9-hour flight to Tokyo. You try to convince a buyer saying that, oh, I want to buy your product, but to ship it must be very expensive. Today, believe it or not, what we charge the customers from home to Tokyo is less than what we can charge from home to LA. I mean, it's hard to imagine, but that's the fact of life because, like I say, the Asia freight comes to Honolulu, then it gets on a domestic flight. You know, the domestic flights are full, so you know the salespeople can take it easy because they're just getting transfer cargo going on their flights to the main, and therefore they can demand a higher price per pound. So anyway, I'll continue with that later. So next slide. I'm just showing slides on how cargo gets out of passenger flight. This is the belly of a passenger flight, a wide body, call it. Next slide. This is a 747 freighter. Next slide. See how large this is. From the mainland to Hawaii, we have Pacific Air Cargo, FedEx, UPS, and Aloha Cargo. They fly wide body jets. It comes like this, and it can take a lot of freight. So fortunately for us, they're here, and even going back, they carry a lot of Asian cargo. But at the same token, we can probably squeeze in some of my cargo that I need to get on. Next slide. This is how, those are M1 pallets, and the M1 pallets is 88-inch by 125-inch and about 96 inches high. And, depending on the ceiling, you might be able to get something even higher than that. Next slide. Another thing that we take for granted, and a lot of people may somehow complain about their postal service, but this is one of the most economical services that we can use for shipping cargo. I audit freight bills for a lot of customers, and I saw this customer who came to one of this class, Export 101, but the person was actually looking at shipping product to the mainland, and they're in Kauai. And, oh, it was a doggy bakery. Would you believe it? They do dog food, dog treats. And from Hanapebe is where they're located. They have a small baking facility. They make every day so much, and they get the boxes free from the post office. These are the flat rate boxes, and they can make really so much. So that's the perfect way. So she asked me, can you audit her billing, all her costs and all that? I compared the rates she was paying post office to UPS special rates and also FedEx's special rates. And each flat rate box costs less than, I mean, at the post office, it's $10 cheaper per box. So I told her, you know, you're fortunate, you get the boxes free, they come drop off the empty boxes, you pick up the full boxes, and you can work 7 days a week if you wish. And they'll deliver it within 3 days anywhere in the mainland United States. Now, post office has international shipping too. Post office, FedEx, UPS, one thing to keep in mind, when they ship your product to Asia or some foreign country, they also go through customs with your product. Their customs than the foreign land. So what happens is, you got to think about it. If you use an airline, once it gets to destination in a foreign country, you still got to get it cleared through customs and have it delivered to where you need to get it delivered to. Same thing with an air freight forwarder, a surface forwarder. We have customers that we take it to the airport that they want it at, but then they have their own broker, they have their own delivery transportation people that can pick up from the airport. So a lot of these things you have to think about beforehand. You know, once you get to discuss somebody, well, the main thing is you get somebody interested in the product. Here they are, you got somebody that wants your product. Now you gotta convince the person that you can have it delivered, one, in the freshness that they wanted, and also the fact that they can get it there inexpensively. The next slide. Next slide, Rob. Next slide. Okay, I want to just go over this briefly here. Shipping costs from here to say Tokyo is directional. It costs 1/3 to 1/4 the cost of shipping it to Tokyo as from Tokyo to Honolulu. If you want to send something to Tokyo, Honolulu, it costs you 4 times as much. As I mentioned to you, it's because of demand. There's little cargo going back to Japan, so we can ask for better rates. And don't forget, basic, you'd be charged by the actual weight of your product or a dimensional weight because of the volume that the product might take up. And give an example, we had a shipment of sandals, slippers, and sandals. And the first shipment, the customer wanted it all in certain boxes, and we had pallets, meaning the wooden pallets, which is 40 inches by 48 inches length and width, and height is about 50 inches. We had about 6 of them, and the shipment going out was quite light, but it took 6 pallets. And what happened was that, and also, how come it's so light? What happened was they had packed it in the boxes. When you buy shoes, you go to a shoe store, you see a lot of them in boxes already. Just look at the side of the box, get the size, you know, that kind of thing, so you can just pick it up. But I said, is it possible that you ship all your slippers and sandals, you know, pack it in the boxes, and all the boxes that you ship, flat them out, make it flat so that it'll take little space. The next shipment and subsequent shipment cost 50% less because of just that thing. They just was able to convince the buyer. It's, you know, best for them to get that done there, repack it into those boxes, and then you can tell it. Again, dimensional weight calculation. This is a trick too, so you got to be careful when you look at stuff. You might have a box, let's say a box that's 24 inches by 24 inches by 36 inches. And if you use the formula length times width times height and divide by 194, domestic carriers, domestic freight forwarders, air freight forwarders use 194 for domestic, and they use 166 as a divisor for international. But if you go on FedEx and UPS, they use the same length times width times height, but they use 166 for domestic and 130. So 136 for international. In other words, it's a hidden price increase because they're going to charge you for more weight, the volume weight. So you have to be careful too on that. Yeah. And I'll give you another example. This one lady I wanted to audit her bills, and she says, "Brian, I'm getting 50 cents a pound. There's no way you can beat that price. I don't want to hear it, you know." So she just refused to let me, you know, audit her bills. I was going to do it for free. But six months later, she needed my help in something else, some kind of social event. So she said, "You still can audit my bills?" I said, "Yeah, I've been glad to." I went back to the office. She gave me 4 months of billings, airway bills. And in that 4 months of billing, I would save her, she was getting 50 cents a pound, but my rate at that time was $1 something. But because of the dimensional weight factor, she was paying, I would have saved her $5,000 in that 4 months. And I said, "You could have a real, you know, good Christmas party." She says, "How can that be? I'm paying only 50 cents a pound." I said, "That 50 cents a pound did not include pickup, delivery, fuel surcharge, a lot of the hidden things. Also, the dimensional weight factor, I was telling you, domestically 194 for domestic divisor. That company was losing 94. I told you, this industry that we're in the air side is not regulated. Whatever the market was there. And I said, they use 94, not 194, 194. So anyway, that's why you're paying for a lot more dimensional weight. She got upset. She called the sales rep, who I knew was a friend of mine. We're all in our industry, all friends. But I could hear her say, I told you so, I told you so, you know, but she didn't know. But then that's how, if you just, sometimes just listen to certain things, you never know because our market is really not regulated. So whatever the market is there, you just, somebody might just charge you whatever you think they can get away with. And that's what was happening to this customer. And that lady, the president of the company, became my best sales rep. She was telling all her friends to use my company. But I'm not saying that I'm the only one that uses the correct way. A lot of companies do the correct way. It's just that you have to be aware of some of these little things that inside. So same thing with going to Asia. We have a lot of places today because of COVID. Since COVID, Japanese weren't coming here, but since then, since COVID started, my international shipments to Japan, to Hong Kong, to Beijing, to Taiwan, Korea, has just jumped. We've really been shipping a lot of international shipments, and for some reason they can't come here, but they still like to buy all our products. Next slide, please. Okay, same thing with conventional waste. Okay, a lot of at origin, some of the things that people charge, you have to provide an invoice and a packing list. But then if for some reason you can't do it, you need the help of a carriers won't do it, but a freight forwarder might do it. But they will charge you for it. It's not that difficult to do, but you got to do that. The shipper's export declaration, once the value of your invoice is up to a certain amount, $2,500 or more, you need to have the special SED, we call it, shipper's export declaration. It's required by customs, but it's free. But then a lot of companies charge just to have that data. Certificate of origin, you can get that from the Chamber of Commerce. Some of the other documents, depending on the product, you need to get that. And those are necessary requirements that we help. Security screening, that's another thing. Everything going out on a passenger flights or cargo flight has to be screened, either by X-ray or by a dog sniffing. A lot of things like that needs to be done, but some of them come with the territory. We do it here to check things out, but the same token, when we get to the airlines does it in. So anyway, just to make sure that the traveling public is safe, and I really believe in that. We had an incident once. I was shipping coffee beans, green coffee beans, 100-pound sacks, I think it was going to Japan on Korean Airlines. And also listening to the news on the radio one morning, about 9 o'clock in the morning, and they're saying, oh, they're evacuating this Aloha cargo site, back in the Elliott Street area, because they found a bomb threat in the cargo hold. I go, oh my goodness, what's going on? And then I get a call from Korean Airlines manager and said, Ryan, it's your shipment that's everybody's evacuating. I said, wait a minute. So I went straight down to Korean, which was handled by our cargo, and I was looking at the dog. The dog was doing the job, sniffing the bomb. And they tried to probe through that burlap bag. They tried to find anything, couldn't find any kind of bomb threat. So I looked at it, I said, give us something. I'm talking to the customs guy and the dog trainer and dog handler. I said, do you have somebody in Kona? And they said, yeah, we have a customs officer in Kona. Go to the supplier, the shipper of this goods. This was the coffee packing place. And I said, I bet you the coffee is stored at the same place that the green bags is stored, same place with the fertilizer. The fertilizer is, can be sniffed by the dog and tell that it's bomb. Sure enough, half an hour later, I get a call. Thank you very much. We didn't have to retrain our dogs. They found that the doggone burlap bag is right next to the stack of fertilizer. And so what happened was that they were able to let it go. But I brought that up to let you know how serious it is to make sure that nothing gets on a plane that's dangerous. And so sometimes you may have a slight, delay, but believe me, it's because people are making sure that your flight is safe. Okay, so anyway, there are some other things, but I won't go into details. You can call me up on that, on the CIV certificates, etc. There's a lot of things that, special things that are required for certain products. Next slide. Oh, this is something else. When you make your deal with your customer, the buyer, you should know the Incoterms so that they can you can talk about it. And this means that you've heard of FOB, this FOB Honolulu Airport, FOB Tokyo Airport. There's all kinds of stuff, and that's where responsibility lies. In other words, when you sell your product, you're selling to the person that this product, I'll pay everything all the way to Tokyo Airport, and then that'll be what we'll do. And that's the pricing. And after it gets to Tokyo, it's up to you, the buyer, to clear customs and have it delivered to where you need to have it delivered to. So these terms are the things that you have to deal with to know, so that insurance-wise, if something happens in Honolulu on your product, or for instance, we talk about chocolate candy, if something was left out in the hot sun, it's still a responsibility of the shipper. And the shipper is going back to the airlines and freight forwarding. And you're going to say, well, it's not packed properly. You should have had it in a temperature controlled container, or should have done this and that. But it's just that we have to take care of your product to the best of our ability, so that when it gets there, it's in the top shape. We had a shipment of chocolate candy that I got a call saying that in Osaka, they had about maybe 10 cases had melted. You know, when chocolate melts, it has a grayish looking thing on the around. You can still eat it, but it doesn't look good. So, a month later, I was going on a business trip to Osaka. So I went to that place. The customer held it there. What happened was, we take precaution on making sure that it's loaded just when the plane is ready to load. The airlines will take the cargo out to the plane side, but if the plane is not ready to accept it, it's going to sit out in the sun. So we make sure that the airline knows it's one of our cargo, and then it only goes out from the warehouse, cool warehouse, when the airline is ready to load it into a plane. Now, same token, when it gets to, let's say, Korea, when they first opened the Incheon Airport, I was there for the opening ceremony, and I noticed that they take off the cargo, inbound cargo, and say, for instance, if there was chocolate, they'll take it out and they'll leave it next to the plate side. And it takes 15 to 20 minutes before somebody from cargo comes and picks that up. It takes a whole bunch of containers back, and the cargo takes 15 minutes from the plane side to the cargo terminal. And once it gets to the cargo terminal, we get 5 temperature climatic zones in that cargo warehouse. So things like that got to be looked at. And so what happened was, I made sure that on the airway bill, when the shipment gets to Korea, it's picked up right away. They send a special truck, tug operator to get the plane side. As soon as it takes it off the plane, it'll take it back to the terminal. And we want it in an air-conditioned type temperature, 19 degrees Celsius. That's what we put down on paper, just to make sure that it doesn't get damaged. And after that, we tell them they got to get the consignee has to make sure that they pick it up and take care of it. But these Incoterms are important for you to know. Next slide. Card delivery date. I just mentioned this briefly because you see on the bottom box, they have priority standing before space available, ground service for next day air. Got a shipment. This was an inbound from the mainland, and there was a bunch of doors for. Mike Kelly had an open house, and they had to. This was a Thursday. They were missing all the front doors of these open house door homes, special homes, and everything was complete except the front door. It was delayed in manufacturing. So they asked us to pick it up. We picked it up on Thursday, delivered it on Friday, and then it anyway ended up on time. Everything was taken care of. But the guy told me, you know, Brian, if you sold us next day air, okay, not next day air. I'm gonna take it back. The other customer company that gave him a quote said next day air, but then next day air, they thought it was pick up today, deliver tomorrow. Next day air, but next day air meant to Hawaii you gotta add an extra day. If it's Thursday pickup, you're not gonna get it to Monday. That's too late already. So for that company, they have to pay priority, and the priority was really high. Our price was just it was from the West Coast, so just made a standard. But I'm telling you, the problem is that terminology is important, so you got to make sure that you're not thinking that, hey, next day here, it sounds like, yeah, I want it the next day, tomorrow. But that's not what they need. Next slide. Next slide. Sometimes you need to know, like small package specialists, but the FedEx UPS, we don't, deny that they do the best job for small packages and things like that. Destination, some people are very good at sending things to Japan. Some people are very good at sending things to Canada. Or commodity specialists, fresh fruits and vegetables. Some people are good at that. So you should get to know who these people are when selecting the carrier. Next slide. Okay, just remember, air freight is not regulated. The shipper is ultimately responsible for any shipping deficiency. One of the things too to realize that I went to a claims class and I didn't realize, 4 feet high is pretty high. A product, if it's dropped from the height of 4 feet, if it doesn't, it shatters. The package hasn't been packed properly. So you have no claims with the carrier. Unless you took, of course, you can see a forklift fall right to the side of it, then the carrier is responsible. But if something's packaged, you got to make sure that it's packaged to be able to withstand a drop of 4 feet. Nobody's going to drop to 4 feet, but that's the way the law reads. Next slide. Next slide, Rob. Okay. Just saying that full container is the best race. You get to maximize everything in there. But from Hawaii to Asia, we don't have too many full container loads, or less than full container loads. So it might be difficult. I'm just saying that you have to shop around and be aware of all these hidden things. You might want to ship on a line going from here to Yokohama. But then the ship will go maybe from here to, say, Kaohsiung in Taiwan, then it'll go to Busan, and then get over to Yokohama. And that might take 3 weeks. And so you got to know all that kind of thing. Slide, please. I think that's all I have. But I'm going to quit here. I was going to show you some slides. Are there any questions? I just want to let you folks know that, Jamie mentioned about taking advantage of all the trade shows, like Tokyo Gift Show, going here. I've been all around. I've been to Beijing restaurant and hotel show. Been to the Shanghai food show. I've been to Guangzhou for the Canton Fair. It's so good to go and take a look at what you might be up against if you're a producer of a certain product. If you go to the Canton Fair, everything that's manufactured in China is shown there. And then you can see what they have. The only thing that, I got to meet some people from the vice president of purchasing for Walmart. I was at the Canton Fair and sat with him. they pay a company in Shanghai to go out and make sure that if they order, 1,000 dozen T-shirts, that manufacturer can make it. And then they have inspectors go take a look at it. When they ready to ship, they inspecting everything, make sure that it's made to the specification as when they have requested the purchase. So you might not be able to do all that yourself, but then if not, when you get something that's not what you ordered, it's going to be
Brian, there's a question that came in regarding US Postal Service, which I agree with you can be very useful, especially when you're sending small amounts of products. So a lot of companies, when they first start exporting, they may be using the US Postal Service and flat rate boxes to Japan or wherever. At what point in your experience does a company move from using the US Postal Service flat rate shipment boxes to needing a freight forwarder and a company like yours?
I would say anytime you have to ship over 200 pounds, in one shipment or more, you might start off with a 10-pound box, 50-pound box. They take maximum 70 pounds in the box. FedEx, UPS, the same thing. But once you get to boxes bigger than that or heavier than that, or you got commodities that need special handling, then you should start asking around and finding out what's the best way to do it. But like I say, we take this for granted because we get the mail and the postal service, but they got so much good things at the same time, because also it's a buyer beware market, no matter what you do. And it's not that I'm not trying to scare you. I think it's a terrific market. That's why I'm saying that take advantage of what the state of Hawaii does, what Jamie said. Go to some of these shows, try to see if the product will sell. We had one show at this was at the Asian show. I'm sorry about that. It just took a minute. The company I was shipping for them is called the French Gourmet. They were in the basement down the 4th Street Mall because that was the coolest place they could find to make these. They would freeze the bakery, I guess the dough, and they hired my company. We would ship it all around Japan, Hong Kong, ship it to all around the mainland US. And these were small packets, but each one had dry ice in it to keep it frozen for a certain length of time. But they went to the Beijing show, and so we had cases of frozen dough to take and to showcase. So they made arrangements for that. The show was in a big Chinese exposition hall, and the neighboring hotel next door, they made arrangements to use their ovens. What happened was that on a Sunday, Monday it's going to start, but Sunday I decided to help them with my hand truck, taking the frozen dough to the hotel next door. Right at the exit, the security guard says, "No, sir, you cannot take this out. This convention center is a duty-free zone. We still haven't entered into China, so you got to leave it there. You can't take your product up to there." So no, we're just going to have it baked and brought back. No, you can't do that. So in dismay, we went back. And here I am trying to figure out where we went to the U.S. U.S. had the 4th floor all to ourselves. Huge facility. I saw a company that was making pizza ovens. They were selling pizza ovens, big ovens, So I said, "Does that work?" He said, "Well, if it'll work if I just hook up a propane tank, but we need the product to make." I said, "I got the product if we can make it." That product, we left it with them to keep it in the freezer. They bought the propane, decided to roast it from 7 o'clock in the morning. The show started at 9. At 7 o'clock in the morning, we got there at 7:30. From the first floor, you can smell the aroma of fresh baked products coming from the 4th floor. We go up there, it was heaven. That company made it so big. French Gourmet. We got the U.S. pavilion was offered. The next year was in Shanghai. any place you want, we put you guys front and center because of French Gourmet. French Gourmet moved out of their basement in Front Street Mall, they built another place in Beaverley. It was one of those things, they started to ship boatloads to Hong Kong. And from Hong Kong, they do distribute. I lost that count because they're shipping boatloads of frozen dough and delivering all around. But the shipping cost from Honolulu to Hong Kong was much higher than LA to Hong Kong. So they moved to the mainland. And so even here, they lost out. They moved to the mainland and they started to direct. That was a neat success story just because of that one show. Anyway, sometimes from bad came good. Okay,
Right.
sorry about that. So,
Oh, that's a very interesting, Brian. Thank you. So again, there's no more questions. I'd like to thank Brian. I love having him as a speaker because you know, I like to say he's forgotten more about air cargo than I could ever know. He's been doing this for a long time and has a lot of answers. And I suggest that our Hawaii companies who are looking into exporting should contact Brian or somebody like Brian, because he can save you an awful lot of time and energy and money later on. So thanks again, Brian. I'll stop
you're
sharing
welcome.
your screen. And now our next speakers are the tag team of Dale Wright and Neale Rath. Both I'd like to thank for being here. Both are board members of the Hawaii Pacific Export Council. Neale is the immediate past treasurer and Dale is vice chair. They can both give a brief introduction about themselves. And then they're going to talk about the cultural issues of exporting, which I think are also extremely important. And gentlemen, if you don't mind, I'll chime in if I have something to say, but the two of you, please go ahead. Thank you. This is, again, Neale Rath and Dale Wright.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, my name is Dale Wright. I retired in 2018 from the federal government. I had been a U.S. foreign commercial officer in Tokyo, Beijing, Mexico City, and Budapest, Hungary. Before that, I was the head of our office in Sacramento, the Export Assistance Center there. I spent a total of 9 years in Japan. So Rob asked me to do this cross-cultural communications presentation. And Neale, if you want to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Dale. Yes, hello, everyone. And thank you, Rob, for the introduction and for inviting me to participate with Dale in this. I'm Neale Rath, and I have been, most of my career has been within the management consulting industry as a management consultant. And I began my career in management consulting while living and working in China, where I had been doing some studying and then found the opportunity to get into the consulting sector, and altogether lived over in China for 5 years, but since then have maintained a very strong international focus in my career in the consulting work that I've done for over 16 years. And over the last few years, I've actually began to explore different avenues within my career, particularly in the tech sector most recently, but have always really treasured my opportunity to be part of the Export Council because of just being able to be surrounded by people that are laser focused on very, very specific, unique elements of the overall exporting toolkit and journey that is really of incredible value. So I hope you all have felt that through this experience today in Export 101, but glad to be here. Dale,
Thanks.
would you like to? Thank you.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is talk about cross-cultural communications today. And I'm going to at first give a few scenarios of American business people who have gone overseas and kind of flubbed, for whatever reason, based on cultural communications or lack thereof. So I'm going to give the scenario, and then maybe if Neale, you don't mind acting as my foil, yeah,
Happy to.
You can maybe tell the audience where they went wrong. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. So, the thing about cross-cultural communications is, and an often overlooked aspect of international business. It's vitally important, but there's a lot of negotiations that have failed because of a lack of understanding of cross-cultural stuff. Thing that to know is that, of course, business negotiations are not done company by company, but person to person, right? And so how a person's growing up, their cultural milieu, their language, how things might be interpreted or not during business negotiations. These are very, very important things. And, it's interesting because you say communications, sometimes communications can create barriers as well. And, a lot of companies, I think, tend to think, well, okay, I'm going to be doing business in Argentina. So, a member of our staff or executive committee or whatever, he's Hispanic from California. Let's send him to Argentina and, have the negotiations with our distributor. So in this particular scenario, Mr. Navarrete, he goes to Argentina, to Buenos Aires. And of course, as soon as he gets there, he wants to start doing business. His Argentinian interlocutors are like, well, you've come a long way and, take a couple of days off and then, we'll start our business meetings in a couple of days. Mr. Navarrete didn't quite get that because, for him, time is money, like a lot of American business people. And so he was immediately at loggerheads with his interlocutors. So I don't, Neale, can you explain maybe what's going on and what kind of dynamic we have?
Sure, I'd be happy to kind of add my observations, and Dale, please chime in too, because what I'm seeing here is a very common misperception on behalf of particularly we American business people to see an opportunity to go pay a visit to a location, whether that be customers or business partners of any kind, as a strict time boxed get down to business and get the job done kind of a venture. And what I think we oftentimes tend to overlook is the degree of importance that our counterparts overseas may place on the process of actually building and establishing and developing a rapport and a relationship and a sense of trust and familiarity to be able to then found the following kind of granular business detailed discussions upon. And so this is something that I think Americans have kind of quintessentially underestimated and not fully understood the importance of this piece of the overall business process when dealing with many different counterparts from a variety of locations all around the world. Would you agree with that, Dale?
I would, totally, definitely. And yet the other thing coming into play in this particular scenario too, is that Senor Navarrete, who was born and raised in California, but of obviously Hispanic heritage, had more or less adopted American business practices, right? So, he was all like, well, let's get down to business, time is money and blah, blah, blah. And failed to kind of recognize that, of course, in Latin America, things go a lot slower. So, yeah, definitely. Another scenario is in Japan. So this American businessman goes to Japan and things seem to be going great, with his potential distributor. And at the very end, he gets up and gives this speech about, how great it is working together and blah, blah, blah. And he gives this kind of example of two trains on different tracks, but they're going in parallel. And he thought, that's kind of cool. But to his surprise, at the end of his comments, the Japanese business people got up and left. And he couldn't understand what was going on. Well, it turns out that the translation and the perception of parallel in Japan is kind of different than it is in the United States, right? For us, we're like parallel. That means we're in the same direction and everything's hunky-dory. In Japan, it kind of means, two different tracks means, well, we're on totally separate planes here. And obviously we can't do business together. So, is it a problem of perception? Yes. Maybe it was a problem of translation, possibly too. But, these are kind of things that you sort of have to be aware of. Yeah, business transactions fail, I think, due to cultural differences more than anything else. And some people think that they're attuned to these differences. So another scenario would be in Germany. Mr. Fred Wagner, who also born and raised in the United States of German ancestry, speaks fluent German. He goes to Germany and, regales his German contacts in his fluent German, proceeds to give jokes and, thinks he's just getting, a great relationship going. But to his surprise, nothing seemed to go forward. And what do you think, Neale? What was the problem here?
This one is tricky, Dale, and I'm trying to determine whether maybe there's an element of understanding who his audience is, and that comes into play.
Exactly.
Help me out with that.
Yeah, exactly. Because it turns out Fred is fairly young, and his German interlocutors were middle-aged or older, and they didn't appreciate the whole joking thing. Germans are probably even worse than us in terms of wanting to get down to business, right? And so, yeah, there was that kind of misperception, if you will, and just the fact that the American company would send somebody so young to try to ink a deal, kind of put a damper on things. So exactly. Let's go to the Middle East for a minute. And perceptions, how does one side perceive us and we perceive them, and some of the cultural things that, especially in the Middle East, you have. And so here's an example in Saudi Arabia. Again, American businessman goes and he's talking to this company's staff in Riyadh or wherever, and talking about the plans they have going forward. And what his staff keeps coming back with is the term inshallah, which, is common throughout the Middle East, means God willing. But he kind of was really ticked off because everything he tried to propose, they came back with inshallah. And he looked at it as them not accepting their responsibility for making things happen. But what really is the inshallah, do you think there, Neale? What really does that mean?
This being such a common thing to say, and also having a connotation, it directly references God, Allah in the statement, makes me feel that there must be an element of kind of connection that someone is expressing when they're using this kind of language with you, to kind of connotate that we're on the same page here. This is something that I'm saying this because I'm showing you that I'm very much attuned to everything that you're saying. And well, I might not be in a position to actually commit to any very particular details of an obligation on behalf of my business that I'm representing. I'm saying this to you because I want you to know that I'm on the same page. This is kind of like an American thumbs up, if you will. That's my interpretation. How does that fit with your understanding of the situation?
Yeah, that jives totally, actually. Because it does mean, God willing, but it's not like, well, we have no responsibility for this. It wasn't like that at all. It was more like what you said, kind of a thumbs up thing. Of course, the success or failure depends on God, right? So inshallah. So the American wasn't really understanding the full meaning of inshallah and just thought his staff was shining him on, basically. So, yeah. Somebody maybe more attuned to the Middle East should have been sent there, I suppose.
Classic example of how easy it is for things to become lost in translation when you're trying to make literal translations of phrases like that. And I think that's
Absolutely.
something that happens all over the world very
All over the world.
frequently.
On both sides. We shouldn't mean to pick on American business people, of course, because the reverse happens as well. So,
Of course.
yeah. So, you know, we talk about cross-cultural communications, but nonverbal communications are also extremely important. And this is probably even more overlooked than, you know, more of the speech or, you know, personality type of thing. So we have an example here in Singapore where, again, American business goes to Singapore and he's kind of rallying the troops, you know, probably the, you know, the Singapore entity of this American company. And seeing things are going well, you know, he's getting everybody all excited. And at the very end, to kind of point out how enthusiastic he is, he goes like this with his fist into his palm. And all of a sudden, there's all these kind of like very embarrassed Twitters and, you know, things going on in the audience. And what did he do? That was a no-no.
That clearly must mean something very specific in Singapore that it does not mean in America.
Yeah. So apparently it's tantamount, maybe in Singapore and Southeast Asia in general, I'm not sure, but to giving the finger, you know. And so, you know, it's kind of a sexual thing. So that's why everybody was embarrassed and kind of you know.
Rough choice of gestures.
Yes, indeed. Another example would be in Kuwait. So an American businessman goes there and he's meeting his Kuwaiti interlocutor. And it seems like, you know, they have a great relationship going on, developing. And at the end, they shake hands, which of course is common in the Middle East. But when they shook hands, the American also put his left hand over, you know, his right hand and his interlocutor's right hand. What happened there?
The double-handed handshake. Oh, what a dangerous, you know, if you were to do that to someone in the United States, that person would feel that, wow, this is a very sincere handshake. This person who's shaking my hand is clearly trying to demonstrate that this handshake means more to them than just a standard casual kind of thanks for your time kind of a handshake, right? So how ironic that it could have a terribly different interpretation in a different part of the world, because there would, instead of being a just a very generic kind of representation of someone's sincerity, of kind of going all in on a handshake, it probably has a very specific meaning in Kuwait. I think I might know what that is, but Dale, would you mind sharing the details?
Yeah, well, using the left hand in the Middle East is definitely a no-no. It's considered an unclean part of the body. And, you know, I won't say why, but I think most people can figure out, you know, what the deal is. And so the initial handshake was fine, but then when he put his left hand over it, that totally sullied the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, his
soiled it,
so to speak. And his interlocutor got very upset. So yeah.
Mm.
So, and those kind of things are common all over the world. And we're going to get to later some of the resources you can use, you know, before you go to some of these countries to figure out what to do and not to do.
Dale, can I jump in just for a moment? I want to point something out that strikes me with the last few examples that you mentioned, and particularly when you talked about the experience that the business person was having when their counterpart was saying inshallah, and you know, the God willing phrase, and then also with the American in Singapore that gave the old kind of super enthusiastic kind of fist pound into the palm. These both strike me as examples where there's some kind of a gesture or a phrase that really might mean something in your own culture, but when you consider the meaning that you're trying to convey outside of your culture, may be very just unknown. And I think is the point that I think is important for us to remember is that when we're communicating outside of our own culture, it's very important to be very deliberate about the words we choose and the phrases that we articulate, and be careful not to rely on things that are too kind of culturally unique, you know, to be sure that it has that kind of meaning in a different culture outside of your own.
Yeah, for sure.
So, you know, slow communications is also something that I think is very important to remember. Just taking a step back and kind of making sure that you're really articulating and enunciating everything that you're saying, assuming that you don't have a translator, you know, that we're very fortunate often, we Americans are, when we're overseas doing business, that frequently we can find ourselves in situations where our counterparts speak English, some level of English, which is what a blessing, right? And when you find yourself in situations like that, it can be tempting because we all just want to come off as genuine as possible, especially if we're representing our own business, you know, our own products. We want to be coming off as ourselves, our true, genuine selves, and be very comfortable in that engagement. Sometimes, however, that can lead to us using language and gestures and phrases that feel very natural and comfortable for us, but forgetting that those things are very culturally unique here in America, you know, and, you know, we're in a place like Hawaii or something like that, and we're saying that to someone that we meet on the street. They could be a total stranger, but they would understand exactly what we're talking about because they're from here and they understand that phrase or that gesture or that, you know, way of speaking about something. Whereas when we're overseas, we need to be very careful to just boil all of everything we're trying to express down to very simple language, the simple English building blocks that can convey these points of meaning, and not relying on kind of a vernacular that wouldn't necessarily be familiar to people in a different culture that have just learned English as a second language.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, I think Americans, you know, they come across as being, we come across as being very friendly overseas, right? Which is a good thing. It can be taken too far, however, sometimes. So you do have to think about that. And, you know, especially in Japan, where, you know, you have polite versus like normal speech in Japanese, you have to be careful who you're talking to. You know, are they considered quote unquote superior to you in terms of hierarchy? I used to work for Mitsubishi Corporation in Japan. And one day I was supposed to meet the section chief, the bucho. And my friend there said, oh, you're going to meet the bucho, you know, you've got to speak really polite Japanese. And I was more used to speaking kind of normal Japanese. And I thought to myself, well, if I try to speak really polite Japanese, I'm not so used to it, I might screw it up, you know. So I spoke the normal kind of mid-range polite Japanese, and it worked out fine. But my Japanese counterparts wouldn't have been so lucky, right? If they hadn't used that super polite Japanese. And I just, you know, I wanted to talk about Japan a little bit since that's probably the major market for a lot of our exporters here. You know, the Japanese hate saying no, right? It's just one of their things. They think it's impolite, so they'll skirt around the issue. It's all up to us to figure out, oh, okay, you know, they're actually saying no. And one example I have, I was a student at Keio University way back in the 70s and about to graduate, and I saw that they had a program for teaching Japanese as a second language. So I thought, you know, I'd kind of like to do that. And so I went up to talk to the person who was in charge of that. And I said, well, you know, of course, we're speaking in Japanese. And I said, you know, this is something I'm very interested in. And he's like, muzukashii ne, which, you know, means very difficult. And I kept pressing it, you know. And I think it went back a second time and talked to somebody else and got the same response. And then it dawned on me, okay, they're telling me to forget about it, Charlie. You know, this isn't going to happen for you. So, So, there's all these kind of things. I worked for Canon Camera for 4 years, actually as a subcontractor. I wrote a book for them. And during our book process, we had this designer who kept putting all these kind of cutesy little cartoonish things all throughout my book, and everybody knows anime, right? And, they like that kind of cutesy thing, Hello Kitty, Chan, and all that stuff. And I kept trying to, in meeting after meeting, I kept saying, look, this book is being bought by people who are buying $300 cameras. They don't want it to be a cartoon. So it took me a long time to get my point across. I kept at it though. I think I got 3/4 of all the cutesy things out of there. So, but it did take quite a long time. So
I'm not surprised that you couldn't quite get them to extract all of them.
yeah,
They just
exactly.
absolutely had to have a few in there, didn't they?
Had to compromise somehow, right? So the other thing about a big difference between Americans and Japanese business people and people in general is that we often like to ballyhoo our successes of our company, the successes of ourselves in our careers and whatever. But of course, the Japanese don't do that at all. And there's a phrase in Japanese called derokugi wa utareru, which means the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. And so, going into Japan, especially if you're new to that culture, you have to keep these things in mind. Another market that I'm pretty familiar with is Mexico. And of course, unlike Japanese and Americans who really want to protect their time, and Japanese are known for being very on time for everything, including their rail system. Mexicans are more laid back about time management. And it's not uncommon in Mexico to be kept waiting for 30 minutes for a meeting to start. I've been in that kind of situation when I worked for the embassy in Mexico as well. And, you can't get all hot under the collar, and think that they're disrespecting you, because they're not. It's just the way they do things, right? And the other thing that's really interesting in Latin America is space management. So most of you know the term abrazo in Mexican Spanish, which is kind of like the bear hug, and they give that to you upon meeting you. It's like, mi amigos. It's like you've been amigos for a long time, which you haven't been, but that's kind of how they start the relationship. And if you kind of back away, that's pretty insulting, which I think would be our tendency, and certainly the tendency of Japanese people to do that too, right? Until they get used to it. So, it's the whole thing about going slowly and, establishing relationships like Neale said earlier. And there's a difference in attitude towards work too, you find in Latin America and especially Mexico. And they have a saying in Mexico, uno trabaja para vivir. So uno vivir para trabajar. So uno no trabaja, So uno trabaja para vivir. One works to live, right? Uno vivir para trabajar. One lives to work, is kind of what we think in America and Japan and some other cultures. And also, this kind of fosters harmony, I think, in the workplace, where people aren't, all kind of fighting against each other to try to raise up a head and whatever, right? Again, derokugi utareru, but so the other thing too in Latin America is, criticism of the boss or the company or whatever is kind of frowned upon. You don't want to be too impolite, I guess you could say. So I think you might have some interesting ideas about China, Neale. What do you think?
Yes, exactly. I'd love to chime in about China. And it's nice to talk about these things sometimes through the lens of specific countries. And it's also nice to talk about generalities, that would apply pretty much anywhere in the world. But something that I've always been very cognizant of when doing business in China is it pertains to this element of establishing a rapport and a relationship before anticipating that there's going to be any kind of meaningful business decision making happening. And there are a wide variety of different avenues toward doing that, toward accomplishing that. And one that I think is very effective that I want to highlight is the opportunity to demonstrate your sincerity in making a visit. And this really applies no matter what kind of business you're doing. If you're trying to sell your products, that's probably most relevant for this audience. But if you're trying to develop any kind of a partnership or seek service from any party over in China, a very effective method of establishing the first step in building that relationship that is going to be important no matter what it is you're trying to accomplish is extending a sincere gift, a heartfelt gift to your the interlocutors that you're meeting with. And it doesn't need to be something valuable or expensive. What most effectively is to bring something that means something to you in your home. You know, so being from Hawaii, that's something that we have lots of options, you know, and you don't have to spend an arm and a leg, but something that is very kind of symbolically Hawaiian, and just give a little bit of aloha with a nice little gift. And you'd be surprised at how far some small token that you're granting to your meeting counterpart can take you. So and really that's the beginning of this process of building a relationship, establishing this familiarity and a sense of trust that can then lead to very effective meeting outcomes. Rob, would you mind me asking you quickly, what's our timeline look like right now for wrapping this piece up?
We're okay.
Okay.
I have some questions for you guys I'd like to bring up.
Okay.
So let's assume some of our Hawaii companies are going to go to Japan, for example, and it may be their first time going to the Tokyo International Gift Show. What's a good dress code for that? And going out to meetings in Japan, maybe going on to Korea, going to China, seeing some customers there. What should somebody wear? And then I'd like Dale to chime in on Japan in particular about the business cards. Because, and let me say that I think post-pandemic, I can see clearly the US, that people that I meet in the US have completely abandoned business cards. They just don't even exist anymore. But that's not true in Japan and some other places. So I'd just like to hear your opinions on that.
Well, first of all, I mean, Japan is much more of a formal society than we are. So normal business attire is, you know, business suit, and, you know, for women, very dressy business attire as well. You might be able to get away with an aloha shirt if, like, let's say you're in the Hawaii Pavilion somewhere,
Sure.
in Japan at the gift show or Fudex or whatever. But for the most part, if you're going to do business over there, you're going to have meetings, standard business attire, as in the United States, would be common. Korea is the same way, and I'm sure China is too, right?
Yeah, particularly at shows, like you were saying, Rob, and that's important to remember when you're making this kind of visit, to pack with the expectations that you might be in different settings. And excuse me, I find it very common that going to a show where you might have like an exhibition hall, it's very common to have people all in suits and ties, and you know, formal business wear for females. And if there's going to be the opportunity to maybe have more one-on-one time with your client or your potential customer, where maybe you're going out, like going out to eat, I would suggest packing with some options in place so that maybe if you get a sense for what your counterpart's going to be potentially wearing as, you can kind of try to match, you know, or sort of be on the same page from an attire perspective. And so that takes kind of having a little bit of knowledge of your counterpart, and maybe trying to get a feel for, are they kind of a casual person that when they go out to eat, they like to wear jeans and a polo, or are they going to be the ones that go in their business suit and tie out to eat?
Yeah, in Japan, you never find anybody going to that kind of a, you know, business dinner or whatever in jeans or whatever. It's like, they're always in a business suit. So, and regarding Rob, you know, the whole business card thing, what they call meishi in Japanese, you know, the protocol is always to give your business card with two hands and bow at the same time. You daresn't go without business cards. It's really, really important. And that's all I can say about that. It's just, you know, it's kind of your identity that you're giving to them. And so, and they would respond with the same kind of politeness too. So, you know, Americans tend to, when there was a business card culture, we tend to like distribute them like they're, you know, playing cards or something sometimes.
Right.
And, you know, you don't do that in Japan. It's a very formal affair. So.
Yeah, I think that's true still in Korea, and China to a certain degree, Taiwan. What do you think, Neale?
I would love this question, particularly as pertains to kind of the area where I have most of my expertise in China. And this is something that really kind of has a nice common thread to a lot of the presentations today, specifically when Kanzo-san was talking about marketing around the world. He mentioned the importance of being familiar with the local social media platforms, and absolutely essential for, and I think this is true across most of Asia, for us coming from Hawaii here that may be kind of heading in that direction for our exports. Across Asia, you'll find that there are social media platforms that have become absolutely irreplaceable in terms of interpersonal communications. China couldn't be a better example of this with WeChat, Weixin in China, in Mandarin. And Weixin, what they call WeChat there in China. This tool has become an absolute essential tool for any kind of interpersonal communications in China, or official kind of administrative type things too that have to do with any kind of level of government. But when you're talking about exchanging business cards, nowadays in China, people will have their phone out and open up their WeChat page to get you connected on WeChat as the absolute default, 100% of the time. It's not that they still will carry business cards. You'll still see business cards in China, and people will still exchange them, but they're not really going to use them. What they're going to do is find you on WeChat because they've just added you and made you a friend. And that's how they're going to communicate with you too. So a suggestive word of advice for you is do some studying ahead of time, do your homework, figure out wherever it is you're going, what is the platform that's the most common platform of choice for them to use? In China, like I said, it would be WeChat. Download it, create your account, have a real account, you know, with your picture on it. And, you know, you don't have to post a bunch of stuff, but this is what they'll use. It's been decades since there's been any concept of SMS texting in China. Doesn't exist anymore. It's even less common for people to even send emails anymore in China. So much communication, even in the business world, is happening.
Absolutely correct. You need to let's connect on WeChat, because I use it all the time for communicating with my friends in China and business friends, and Singapore also, and Taiwan to a certain degree. But you're absolutely right. And what I found is really interesting about China with regards to WeChat, it's hard to use cash in China anymore.
It is.
And to me, it's part and parcel of this business card thing as well, because people are transmitting small payments and large payments. I mean, micro payments, like if you're buying just a drink on the street or something, that you can pay by WeChat. It's really, really interesting and much
Funny
different.
story, Rob. Last time I was in China, I went to a shopping mall to buy something, parked in the underground parking lot at the shopping mall that was gated, where you have to pay a fee to get out. I find myself after my shopping trip stuck in the parking lot because I literally could not get out of the parking lot without having an electronic payment method like WeChat, or there's a few other ones. And just to be specific about it, foreigners have a very hard time using WeChat to pay because it requires you to have a Chinese bank account. And you
Correct.
can't get a Chinese bank account if you're not a Chinese resident. So that's challenging, like seriously. But there's other apps that you can use to pay to do e-payment. One is called Alipay, which doesn't require you to have a Chinese bank account. So just a little note there in case you find yourself trying to pay for something in China that you can't because it only accepts electronic payment.
That's funny. Is there a resource that you gentlemen could recommend where a company or, you know, a small company in Hawaii can go to look at cultural issues when they're thinking about going to a new country? I just bring up this rather famous book called Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands that is now in its second edition. And I've used this many times when I was going to some new market and I wasn't sure sort of what are the local rules for, you know, obviously do you kiss, bow, or shake hands, but things in terms of dress code, how do you tip, right? I mean, tipping in some countries, believe it or not, tipping is insulting. So how do you know that ahead of time? This is a resource I use. Do you have another one you've ever run across?
Yes. Do we have that slide?
Yes, we do. Rob, could I share screen if you stop share? Can I do that? Thanks. No. Dale, I'm going to pull this up, and if you wouldn't mind kind of speaking to it.
Sure.
Hopefully this is visible to you all.
Okay, great, thank you. So the first one is published by Yale University, and you see the URL right there. It's been around for 50 years, very comprehensive compendium of cultural anthropology. We got 310 plus separate cultural files. The next one is Brigham Young University Culturegrams. And there you see kennedy.byu.edu/culturegrams. And for the US government, there's a whole series of stuff developed by the Department of Army, funny enough, 110 books in the series on various systems and institutions in 110 countries. The reports that I always use the most, though, is the ones by the State Department, where they have, they're called post reports, and they're written for virtually every country where we have an embassy. You can go to state.gov and /post reports, and you'll find those for just about every country you can imagine. They're only 16 to 20 pages in length, so it's very concise. But it talks about, you know, medical facilities, housing, leisure activity, you know, cultural info, whatever. And there's a whole lot of other things. Like if you're really into Japan, you might want to try to get a Japan Times English language subscription, because that really tells you in English what's going on in Japan, and you know, gives you a good feel before you go there for what's happening. So so those are just some of the resources that I've come across.
That's great. That's great. Okay, before we move on to our next speaker, John Holman, do you guys have any final parting words on cultural issues, things you can help people save time, energy, money, and maybe most importantly, embarrassment in a foreign culture? And I would lean towards Japan, just because we know some of our companies here in Hawaii want to look at Japan first.
There is one little thing I'd like to chime in with that we haven't really talked about yet, and that has to do with the prevalence nowadays of translation apps that are out there. And it can be tempting to kind of bring along your translation app and conduct a meeting using it. And I'm not necessarily, these are incredibly useful. out there, and you know, I can't speak highly enough about how amazing they are at doing a great job. However, when you're talking about a business meeting, it's very dangerous to rely entirely on a translation app to be able to conduct a business-oriented meeting. So if you know for sure that the people you're going to be meeting with don't really have a command of English to be able to have a meeting with you in English, I would very strongly suggest trying to find an interpreter to join you for your meeting. And this applies certainly in Japan, but also I think across Asia. I believe I feel confident, fair to say, that having an interpreter in a business-oriented meeting can be extremely helpful, because you're able to make sure that there's a lot of clarity, and you know, your listener, your business counterpart can ask the interpreter questions. You can't really ask an app what they mean by something. You know, when an app is doing a translation, the app spits it out and that's that. But if your business counterpart hears the translator say something that isn't quite clear to them, they're not quite catching what you're meaning by that, they can just ask the translator, you know, help me with that. I'm not sure if I quite understood that point. And this is really important. So it's worth the investment. And it's also can be really helpful to kind of establish a really strong relationship with the person you're meeting with, because a lot more can be done on an interpersonal level with a translator or an interpreter than can be done on an app.
Yep, that's a great point.
It is.
Okay, great, guys. I think that we need to set up a whole separate webinar just on these cultural issues, because I think we could put together a panel and talk for an hour or 90 minutes on these very important issues. So let's think about that. So
Yeah.
thank you again for joining. It was wonderful. Our next speaker is Mr. John Holman, the lone U.S. commercial service officer in the Pacific. He's down at Pier 2 at the Foreign Trade Zone. Welcome, John. How are you?
Good. Thanks, Rob. Good to be here.
Thank you very much. Do you have a presentation to share?
I do. One moment. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can. Looks great.
All right. Anything else you'd like to say, Rob?
No, just that we greatly appreciate your work as Executive Secretary of the Hawaii Pacific Export Council. You've been doing a wonderful job for how many years now? 14, 15
I
years?
don't want to say, Rob. It's
But you can tell us how many companies you've helped.
thousands. Yeah, thousands of companies.
Point, right?
And actually, it's coming up on 17 years that I've been in this role, helping Hawaii companies and those from the Pacific territories.
That's wonderful, and we greatly appreciate it. Hawaii is a much better place with you helping us export. So with that, please jump on in.
Thanks, Rob. Aloha, everyone. My name is John Holman. I'm based in Honolulu, Hawaii, and I serve as the Director of the Pacific for the U.S. Commercial Service of the United States Department of Commerce. And my office here helps Hawaii companies and U.S. companies in the U.S. Pacific territories sell their products and services in markets around the globe. So today I'm going to share with you a few things about exporting, some of the benefits, some of the resources that we have on offer, and a few things to keep in mind as you look to grow your business internationally. Going global. So why should you export? Well, these are turbulent times and markets go up and go down. Sales can be strong or weak depending on the season or the market you're selling into. And 95% of the world's consumers are outside the United States, representing 70% of the purchasing power globally. So if you're only selling in the US, and the US is a huge market, generally speaking, that's only 5% of the global market. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. I tell companies, if you have a product or service that people pay money for, I guarantee you that there are other markets in the world where people will be willing to purchase that product or service. Also, it's a good way to diversify your revenue when you have customers in different markets. You know, one market may slow down, another market may be on the upswing, may be growing. We see that a lot in emerging markets today, where purchasing power is increasing. People are trading up for higher value products and services. So it's a good way to diversify your business. And competition. So it's a globalized world, increasingly competitive. And so if you're not exporting, then your competitors may be getting into exporting, and it will make it more challenging for you to grow at the international level in the future. So there's no time like the present to expand internationally. And then business facilitation is another way of saying it's easier than ever to do business internationally. Free trade agreements have lowered barriers to exporting. Through e-commerce, we see a lot of companies are able to connect with customers around the world, promote their products and services online and through various platforms like the Amazons of the world, and sell into new markets. And then there's government assistance programs like you've heard about today, not only ours, but also the HiSTEP program with DBEDT and the Small Business Administration and many other great programs, including WUSADA. So there's lots of great programs out there to help you go international. One misnomer is that only large, well-capitalized multinationals can do business internationally, when in fact 97% of US exporters are under 500 employees and 75% are under 20, which is more the size we see in Hawaii and the Pacific Islands. And most of these businesses drive job growth, drive creation of jobs. And so that's why we do what we do, is because the return on investment is tremendous. I get asked a lot, what are Hawaii's top exports? And these are Hawaii's top exports at the last time we did this exercise. We're actually in the process of looking at the 2024 numbers now. So we'll see a few shifts here, but by and large, services comprise 98% plus of Hawaii's exports. That includes travel and tourism services, education and training. Anytime foreign visitors or students come to the islands and bring money into our economy, those are service exports. We also have a dynamic architecture and engineering sector, firms here that do projects all over the world, high dollar value in many of those projects. And then the largest category in terms of products is consumer goods and processed foods, agriculture products. And so at last check, broodstock shrimp was Hawaii's #1 product export, followed by macadamia nuts, coffee, bottled water, cookies, papaya, and spirulina algae products. We also export some consumer cosmetics products and apparel, which you see captured here on the slide, which we'll be updating soon as the new rankings come out. So what are the keys to export success? As Rob mentioned at the top, I've been doing this quite a while, going on 17 years, helping Hawaii companies expand internationally. And there are 3 keys to doing business successfully internationally. First of all is motivation. And unfortunately, we don't dish that out here at the commercial service, but I've seen companies that are motivated, get out there, go to trade shows, and meet with potential buyers, find success in international markets. And I've seen companies with kind of average products, not really standing out from the pack necessarily in their local market, but those that are motivated and go out and find the new business, they do it and they can find success internationally. Meanwhile, companies that may have an amazing product, but they really don't invest the time and energy into connecting with new buyers internationally or investing in those relationships tend to not do very well. Number 2 is the path of least resistance. So what market can you get into in the least amount of time, at the lowest cost, and with the least effort? The goal here is to get some revenue going internationally and then reinvest that revenue and experience into the next path of least resistance in order to grow your business successfully. A lot of companies that call me want to get into Japan, used to want to get into China. We don't hear much about that anymore. But for a company that's never exported, never done business internationally, Japan is not the easiest country for most businesses. There's a different language, culture. The standards are very strict there, especially for cosmetics products and food and beverage products. Not to say that Japan can't be a good market for a business, but is it the path of least resistance for your business? It's useful to spend some time and energy researching markets so that you can get in quickly, grow the business, and then take that experience and try it somewhere else. And then the third thing is working with great partners. So these are the people that are in another country that represent your business, that may be promoting your products, They're going to ensure that you get paid, which is very important. And so when you're working with partners that are thousands of miles away, speaking another language, living in another country, have different cultural norms, it's really important that you work with quality partners up front in order to ensure your long-term success. Market entry strategy. So this slide here is a reminder that if the top line are all the things you do for your business domestically to run your business, R&D, manufacturing, distribution, sales, you don't have to recreate the wheel in every country you do business in. So an example of this is the company Shaka Tea. It's kind of make like a Snapple type bottled tea product. A few years ago, they wanted to get into Japan, but they realized it's expensive. It doesn't make sense to ship glass bottles full of water from Hawaii, which usually have to be transshipped through the US mainland and then their way to Japan. Very expensive and pretty much impossible to be competitive once you factor in those shipping costs. So what they did is that we helped them to find a partner in Japan that they licensed the recipes of their products to, licensed the brand. They shipped the dried mamaki leaves, which are very light in weight, over to Japan. And then their partner did the brewing in Japan and bottling and distribution. And so they were able to enter that market, grow that business successfully, and then sold that business a few years ago to, I believe it was King's Hawaiian. Logistics. So the purpose of this slide is to show you that these international commercial terms exist. And so you might meet someone and they say, hey, can you get me a quote FOB, which you see there slightly on the left side. And that means freight on board. You don't have to memorize all these, but just know that someone may ask for a quote FOB, and they're saying that when your shipment leaves the factory on the left, your factory, and then it transfers onto the ship, that is when the buyer will take possession legally of the products, and they're responsible for the insurance costs, the shipping costs. If that container falls off the ship into the ocean and is lost, it's now their responsibility. Conversely, if the terms are DAP there on the far right, then that title transfer happens right outside the buyer's door. So everything is negotiable in a transaction. And so just be mindful that these terms exist, and it can make a big difference in terms of your pricing strategy and when someone's asking for a quote. All right, let's talk about the U.S. Commercial Service, our agency, and how we help companies. So we have a global network of offices around the world at the U.S. embassies, most often at the embassy, but in some cases in commercial buildings in major cities around the world. And we're here to help U.S. companies to compete and win in global markets. Last year, for every dollar that the Congress allocated to our agency, we turned that into $230 in sales for U.S. companies. So who would take that return on investment 230 times? Most government agencies, unfortunately, aren't able to quantify return on investment. Thankfully, we are, based on the type of work that we do, and we're pretty proud of that number and the work that we do here to generate a return on investment on your tax dollars. So the companies that we work with has to be a U.S. business. The product or service has to be at least 51% U.S. content by volume or value. So if you're importing pianos from China and looking to re-export those, nothing wrong or illegal about that. We just can't use our taxpayer resources to support those re-exports. And then we look for companies that are export ready. That is, someone's contacted you and they're trying to make an export sale. So you have a sale in process. You've done some homework and identified what is the path of least resistance for your business. That's why you're taking this course today, to learn more about, how to develop an export strategy for your business. And then maybe checked out some of our training programs, part of the HiSTEP program. And if you check this link out here, you'll see nearly 100 videos that we have created specifically for Hawaii companies and those in the U.S. territories on a whole range of topics, from how to crack the Australia market, the Japan market, exporting agricultural products or exporting services. There's a lot of great videos in there. And so It's great to get educated on some of the opportunities, challenges, so that when you come to us, you have some knowledge about some of the questions where we can best serve you. Now, our services are broken down into 4 main categories: market research. On our website, trade.gov, we publish thousands of reports on markets around the globe in terms of how to do business in places like Brazil, South Africa, France, South Korea, to what are the major industry sectors and what are the trends. So this is the first place to start when you're trying to identify your path of least resistance. We also support trade events around the world where we do matchmaking, usually at the largest trade shows for an industry sector. We just did a show in Australia a few weeks ago around, I believe it was Fine Foods Australia is the name of the show. And we introduced some Hawaii companies to buyers in Australia, and they're already starting to make sales. International partners. So one of the things we offer is something called the Gold Key service. So if you tell us who you would like to connect with, let's say the Target-like store in South Korea, then we would contact companies that meet that profile, tell them about your business, maybe send some samples over, and then those that are pre-screened and are interested, we set up one-on-one meetings for you and those partners. And because of the US government, it shakes out less legitimate partners on the other side and gives you immediate credibility in their eyes. And then finally, consulting and advocacy. We're here to help you answer all those questions about shipping, logistics, protecting your intellectual property, taxes, tariffs, all that stuff. Help you to get that figured out. And we also want to make sure it's a level playing field for doing business internationally. There's some great resources on our websites. Trade.gov is our main hub at the Commerce Department. Hawaii Export Support is the Hawaii Pacific Export Council's website. There's some really good resources and updates there on events. As I mentioned, the YouTube library of the Hawaii Pacific Export Council, nearly 100 videos there. And then export-u.com has some free export tutorials as well. And there's my contact details. So I hope this was helpful to everyone. Rob, are we doing Q&A? Do we have time for that?
Yeah, absolutely have time. If there is any Q&A, please type it in to the chat. Otherwise, if you could send me a copy of these updated slides, I'll include them in the presentations that go out to the audience.
Yes.
All
Does
right.
anyone have any questions about exporting, about what we do?
I don't see any questions coming in, but I'm sure some companies will be reaching out to you soon. So thank you again, John. Wonderful.
I know, it's like drinking out of a fire hose, isn't it?
Yeah. So especially today's event is a long one, so you know.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. You put me right at the end, right as everyone is getting hungry.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, thanks a lot, John. Thanks for chiming in.
Thank you, Rob.
See you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, everyone. I'm going to go through marketing, international marketing, quickly. As quickly as I can. This is a course that I teach that I'm going to try to do it in about 20 minutes. That would normally take a semester. I hope you can see my presentation here. Again, these are lessons that I'm going to talk primarily about Japan, but that's just a reference case. Anything that we talked about here can be used in other markets, whether that's Canada or Germany or India, or what have you. So what is marketing? Marketing really comes down to the management process through which goods and services move from concept to customer. It really includes the coordination of these 4 holy elements of the marketing world, or all the 4 Ps. It's been this way for many years. This is something that hasn't changed over the years in terms of marketing, and it hasn't changed because it's really become successful. What are the 4 Ps? Product, price, place, and promotion. If you take any kind of marketing class, sales management class, whatever, this is guaranteed to be on the test because it's incredibly fundamental to the course. The 4 Ps: product, price, place, promotion. And it can be applied absolutely internationally. This is not a wholly American concept, although definitely it was created by American marketers. I put this up here too, because sometimes people will think, well, I'd like to export to Asia. I'd like to export to Europe. I'd like to export to South America or Central America or Africa or whatever. That's very difficult to do. And I'm just going to pick Asia as an example. Today, when you think of Asia, it's really lots of different markets with many different languages, cultures, food, ways of doing business, ways of shipping product. It's all very, very different. And just look at the names of these countries and you can see what I'm suggesting. Even in China, even in Japan, but let's talk about China in this regard, that it's geographically huge. We now, after 1997, include Hong Kong and Macau as part of China. But just as you could imagine, say a Chinese company trying to ship to the United States, well, the market in Miami is really different from Boston, is really different from Honolulu and Kansas City and Detroit and what have you. There's a lot of regional differences, and the same can be said for a country like China. And certainly in Japan, there's a big difference culturally between Hokkaido and Okinawa, just the rivalry between Tokyo and Osaka. So please keep these things in mind, that when I talk about sending products somewhere, I'm looking at one specific market, and we'll talk about that on a country basis, but even more specifically later, we'll get to the target market segment, which I think is the most critical aspect for you to look at your international marketing. So I've also broken this up into, assuming that tourism comes back. It is coming back. Japanese tourists coming to Hawaii. The dollar is getting weaker, which I think supports tourism coming back. And it looks at it like two different points of sale. Whether the point of sale is in Japan or whether the point of sale is in Hawaii, it can be really different. And obviously, if we're talking about today, largely doing the point of sale in Japan, and typically that's going to be a Japanese yen transaction. It's not dollars, and it'll probably be 100% Japanese. I would suspect that's the way you're going to do things when you're selling to your products and services in Japan. Point of sale in Hawaii is obviously if tourists or visitors are coming from Japan to Hawaii, it's almost assuredly a US dollar action. And there'll be some mix of Japanese and English there, but largely the more Japanese that you can make that transaction, the better off you'll be. Developed this model, a marketing model a few years ago on selling to tourists that are coming from Japan to Hawaii, and how to feed back product and services to them when they're in Japan. So if you follow this circle around clockwise, you'll find through social media and magazine ads and in-store signage and package inserts and background this cycle of marketing where tourists are coming to Hawaii, buying a product, liking the product, maybe taking some of the product back as souvenirs, and we'll cover that shortly, and getting back to Japan and wanting to reorder the product. And how do we do that? And this model will follow that. And I'm happy to follow up with anybody later if you'd like to jump into this. So let's talk about the first P, the product. I think Jamie Lum in her introductory presentation did a good job of mentioning that we have a fantastic marketing asset behind us in Hawaii every day. If you go outside and just look at the hills, look at the ocean, look at the trees, look at the sky, the clouds, it's the beach. Everybody's dressed in aloha wear and having just a nice natural life in Hawaii in the sunshine. And that is transmitted out to the world it's free marketing for our companies in Hawaii to use just the word Hawaii, the word aloha. I think that translates really, really well globally. I use the example in my marketing course that I teach about comparing, say, Hawaii versus Transylvania. I mean, Transylvania is a real place that assuredly wants to export its products. But what do you think of when you hear the word Hawaii, aloha? What do you think of when you hear Transylvania? It's two totally different things. And people in Transylvania are wonderful people. They have wonderful products, but it's two totally different word associations there. And I think we in Hawaii and our companies in Hawaii have to play this up as much as possible, that we are made in Hawaii, made with aloha, the Hawaii Seal of Quality, for example, these types of programs that are run by the state of Hawaii. Really dive into this head first and use it as much as you can. We talk about Japan. Much of the Japanese market still functions on seasonal sales, whether it's right after the New Year, spring, autumn, summer, Christmas sales, of course, Golden Week, White Day, lots of things that drive seasonal sales. And I think that it behooves our companies in Hawaii who are interested in selling in Japan to understand this seasonality and approach your marketing that way and your pricing that way. This is an important concept that I'm sure most of our attendees have heard about, but I would really welcome you to dig into this a little bit more and research it, the concept of omiyage and how important that is for the Japanese consumer. So let's assume that we have some visitors from Japan coming to Hawaii. What they want to do is take back to Japan products that are relevant to their trip to Hawaii. And that's not a magnet for the refrigerator or some schmaltzy keychain or something like that, but it should tell the story of the trip to Hawaii. So it could be some nice locally made chocolates or aloha wear or natural sunscreens or something that was made in Hawaii in that regard. Could be a small bottle of alcohol, cookies, what have you, but something that really helps tell the story of the trip. And it really needs to be packaged very well, because you simply can't hand somebody a box of chocolate, for example. In Japan, it has to be wrapped nicely and in a separate bag. And I'll spend a minute about that. So here's a typical young lady going out shopping, the way that look at all those bags. And the bag is just incredibly important. And I hot link here to the Japan Packaging Institute because I think it's a fantastic read. And here's some examples of how to fold and wrap. And I mean, the Japanese culture takes this incredibly seriously. By far the most packaging used globally per capita. So please keep this in mind, that whether you're selling products to Japanese tourists that are coming from Japan and they're in Hawaii, or vice versa, if you're starting to sell and shipping product, make sure that it's packaged well. It has these bags. The bag is incredibly important. Every Japanese household has a corner where they stock dozens, if not hundreds, of these bags so that they can give them out to regift things to other people. I recommend putting some business cards in the bags and so that people are able to find you later and help restock. This is a critical thing I alluded to a few minutes ago, is segmenting the market, finding out exactly who is your target market segment. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, you're not just selling to Asia. You're not just selling to Japan, for example. There's 126 million Japanese people in the Japanese islands today. That is not your entire market. Your entire market is probably more like 100,000 of those people, or generously 1 million, but it's certainly not all 126 million people. And we need to focus it intensely on drilling down to find out what is our target market segment. And so as you get more defined in what that market segment is, it becomes easier to communicate with that target market segment, and they want to hear from you. So here, just some examples of what I suggest here. Starting with the population, disposable income, an interesting thing I'm sure everyone's aware, you've heard about it in the news, is that the Japanese population is getting older. Japanese genetically tend to live longer than most people in the world. And through modern medicine and lifestyle, healthy lifestyle, they're living even longer. So there's now over 100,000 people in Japan that are 100 years or older. And I bring that up because I think that this quality of life, which is actually an acronym in Japan, is QOL, is ideal for some of our Hawaii companies to address that market, selling products that are for the older silver crowd. I put this here. I just think it's funny that of all of these people, it's assuredly Hawaii has such a great reputation in Japan that everybody's interested. Everybody knows the word Hawaii and the word aloha in Japan, and we need to use it to our advantage. And something here that's much different than I highlight these cities. These are just cities that are not Tokyo or Osaka, but are other cities in Japan that are bigger than Honolulu. And most people have never really thought about that. But if you were doing marketing and you wanted to work on a targeted market in, say, Hiroshima, it's pretty easy to do. And you would be working, and just Hiroshima is roughly the same population as the entire Hawaiian Islands. This is what it takes to live in Japan. The average living expenditures for a Japanese family, and it's remarkably similar to Hawaii. I think that before we move on to the next subject, it's important to expand on this concept of market research, because you can never really have enough market research, but at some point we need to jump into the market. We need to decide we have enough to either go in or not go in. And there's really no better way to do that than getting out into the market, doing your own eyes and ears on what's going on, and looking at how local companies are packaging things, how it's they're storing things on the store shelves or wherever your product will actually touch the customer. We'll get to that in a few minutes in place, but this is quite relevant. So there's no secret sauce. You just have to get to it. And personally, I think there's no better way than getting to some of these trade shows, and particularly some of the trade shows that DBEDT and HiSTEP program are subsidizing, because you can get in there much cheaper than if you were going to go about your own. Okay, product. We finished that. Let's get on to price. All of these things are included in price. The HiSTEP program can cover a lot of these things in terms of testing of products, getting translation done, all of that sort of thing. One of the problems that we have and have had, particularly after the pandemic, is that the US dollar is very strong. So what does that mean? Well, it means that it takes a lot more Japanese yen to buy $1 US, which means that our products from Hawaii are really quite expensive. They were expensive anyway, but particularly after the pandemic with the very strong dollar, it's expensive. And you can see it on the flip side. If you travel to Japan, you convert your US dollars to Japanese yen and go out to a ramen shop or buy a taxi or buy some clothes or whatever. At this time, you would find it to be remarkably cheap, but that's not always been the case. however it is. I just put up some random chart here of the Japanese yen through 2020. And my point is just bringing this to your attention is that if you're going to get into exporting, I think you have to really track the currency fluctuations and the foreign currency exchange rates in the markets that you're operating in, because it's very relevant as to how your products are priced and whether they feel expensive or not. These are some more charts of the Japanese yen versus the US dollar over time. Pricing and quotes, I try to do as much as you can in the Japanese language. Know the local terms, the price terms that are used in the industry that you operate in, whether that's 210 net 30 or 100% advance payment or whatever. I find that you will still, in Japan, more so in Korea, letters of credit are quite relevant still, almost used nowhere else. But as Susan Utsugi said earlier from Central Pacific Bank, get in touch with your banker. And if you tell your banker that you'll be doing business in Korea, I'm sure your bank will advise you to be prepared for letters of credit. And I won't get into that here, but they can explain it to you and how that works. Will you take credit cards? Which credit cards will you take? I often find outside of the US that these staggered payments can be requested. So let's say you get a large order for something, your several pallets of your product, the customer might ask to be put down 40% payment up front, 40% upon delivery, and then 10% after testing the products to make sure that they meet the standard that the customer is looking for. All of it's negotiable, but I just find that that staggered payment structure is really quite common in Japan. Also, do your products require any kind of after-sales service? How are you going to handle that? If you're handling all of that from Hawaii, it can be extremely expensive to ship warranty products back and forth between Hawaii and Japan, for example. So you may want to stock some parts in Japan and handle warranty replacements from Japan just because it's faster and cheaper than having to do it all from Hawaii. Brian Suzuki talked about this shipping, so I won't spend a lot of time on that. But I would also encourage you to look up the Incoterms, which we touched on a little bit here during today's talks. The Incoterms are quite important, and you should negotiate openly with that. The easiest way to do this from Hawaii is with the Incoterm Ex-Works or EXW, meaning the buyer takes all shipping costs and handles all the insurance and duties and what have you. But a lot of buyers don't like that. They'd like you to have some of the risk. So it behooves you to brush up on these Incoterms. Shipping from Hawaii, again, we cover this at length. But I do highlight here some shipping resources that you can look at. I do find a lot of our companies are using the United States Postal Service at the beginning of their exporting venture, and then they quickly need to get away from that. As Brian mentioned, there's weight limits and what have you that quickly start moving you to UPS and beyond to Yamato and Japan Express and others. All right, let's talk about place very quickly. This is something to think about as your business is growing internationally, and how do you want to distribute the products? And I use multiple dollar signs to show where it's more expensive or less expensive. So for example, staying in Japan, you could hire a Japanese employee full-time or part-time and have that person working in Tokyo, for example. and they go out and sell your product. You yourself could move to Japan. You could send an employee from your office to live in Japan. What does that mean? Well, you have the most control over what that person is doing and can understand what they're doing from 9 in the morning till 5 p.m. or whatever hours that they're working. You have the most control, but I think that it's also the most difficult to arrange and takes the most time from your side. Just under that is an agent. An agent would be somebody who's working on your behalf, but is taking a commission. They're not an employee of yours. However, they wind up taking a commission that could range from 5% to 10 to 15% and beyond, depending on your industry. Sometimes agents receive a monthly stipend, not a salary, but more of a stipend of some $1,000 or so, $5,000 per month to work for you part-time. A distributor is different in that they actually will buy product and then sell it, but you have some input into the marketing of that. Whereas a reseller is really somebody who's completely buying the product from you and selling it outright, and you have very little say or very little control into what's happening there, particularly in terms of the marketing. So could that be beneficial? Well, it's really the cheapest for you. They just send you orders and you sit back and enjoy that business. But typically, they're buying at wholesale and have negotiated with you very good rates. So this is much more higher volume business as compared to up here, typically. And certainly an option in all of these markets. If you've done your market research and you found that this just isn't the most appropriate market for me at this time, you can do nothing. It costs you nothing. And sometimes that's the best option. I've highlighted here some of the most popular stores that you can look at. Some have e-commerce platforms that you could sell on. Major apparel and clothing stores that I would suggest you look at, and grocers if you have products that would work best in that kind of environment. Let's talk about promotion. So it was Dale and Neale had talked earlier about translation. This is just for Japan. This is an app that I've used for several years. It's literally called the Japanese app. And I use that on my iPhone constantly for looking up Japanese words and phrases, and I find it to be very accurate. Now, I wouldn't translate a whole web page or translate a paragraph even, but to translate a small phrase or some words, I think it's very, very helpful. Of course, most people gravitate towards Google Translate, which can work, but again, don't use this to translate verbiage for your website or your social media posts or anything like that. If you're going to get serious about working in a foreign market, I think you need to have somebody on staff who can really communicate in that language. Kanzo Nara talked a lot about this, so I'm not going to spend any time here, but social media is very important. He mentioned Line. And increasingly, I think I'm recommending to the companies that I talk to make videos and put them on YouTube. I think that that's really just a fantastic platform for getting the word out about your product or service. And you know what they say about the old adage that a picture says 1,000 words, and I think a video says, 1,000,000 pictures. It's really fantastic, and it works globally. You can't use YouTube in China, but there's other alternatives to that. But as long as we're speaking about Japan, I think YouTube is fantastic, and it's very easy to get subtitled translations to any videos you would put up. Again, Kanzo Nara talked about all of this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. same thing. I like email newsletters, and people sometimes frown at that when they're just getting involved in marketing, because I don't want to bother anybody and send any newsletters, and they're going to mark my emails as spam or what have you. And it goes back to what I said earlier about your target market segment. If you have defined your target market segment carefully and clearly and concisely, they will want to hear from you. And just think about in your own daily life, you get a ton of email. Some of those emails, you just look at the email header. You don't have to open it before you click delete. But there's many other email headers that you look at and say, oh, that's interesting. I'll click on that one. And why is that? Because you're in the target market segment of whatever email that was sent out. And that's how you need to get your products and services to the point where every message that comes from you is singing directly to that target market segment, so that they're interested in hearing from you. They want to hear from you, and you will open it up and look at what they have to say. I show just some samples of how to a type of software that can be used. There's so many of these that could be used to send email newsletters to your target market segment, but you can track it and see, for example, how many times was your email opened, how many clicks were on it, where was it clicked on from, what software were they using to read the email, was it a Mac or a PC or an iPhone or whatever. It's very, very sophisticated and not expensive really anymore to do this kind of thing through MailChimp or many others. I strongly suggest you start getting involved with some kind of customer relationship management software. The big one is Salesforce, of course. But it can be extremely expensive for a small company, but nonetheless, that's more or less the gold standard. There's others, Insightly, if you're a Gmail user, Zoho, and many others. But it's really important to start doing this so you can track who your customers are and when was the last time you touched them. And in a marketing term, that's when was the last time you saw them, emailed them, texted them, called them, etc. We've talked about this a lot, but trade shows are incredibly important. And I think that our Hawaii companies really need to take advantage of what DBEDT and the HiSTEP program has to offer. I highlighted this here, this QR code, because I think Neale and I talked a bit about this earlier with WeChat, but as you get out into the world, particularly in Asia, particularly in China, but certainly in Japan, if you're going there, that the QR code is going to be used for a lot of things. And you can scan that QR code, but essentially it's used for marketing, logistics, many things. But for the marketer, the modern marketer, the QR code is essential, and it's cheap. There's apps you can get for free on your iPhone or Android device where you can generate QR codes and save them and put them on your presentations or your business cards or your marketing literature, or put them on stickers and put them on pens or whatever you want to stick it to. But somebody will scan this and it'll take them to your website. You could set up the QR code to have all of your contact information or what have you. The reason I associate it with trade shows is because that's, I think, where I see people using them a lot in marketing, is having the QR codes and going around and scanning the codes, or having the codes available to scan so that customers can get a quick view of your website or whatever it is you want to talk about. Another quick point I like to make when I talk about doing things outside of the US in marketing terms is that once you leave the US borders, you will not have 8.5 by 11 inch letter size paper anymore, that it's all A4. And if you're formatting your marketing literature and brochures, make sure that you've set it up for A4 so that when it's printed locally in the market, it'll fit and look good. Online retailers, again, we talked about this earlier today, but Rakuten, Amazon are great options for selling into the Japanese market. Mobile commerce, and similar as Kanzo, Nara had said earlier, mobile e-commerce is huge. And think about it though, if and here on my next slide, I'll show you. What are all of these people doing? Well, this is a typical Tokyo subway. They're watching movies, they're texting their friends, but they're also doing a lot of shopping. And this is a great opportunity for you to sell your products in the Japanese market, because you have a captive audience looking at these screens for an hour, 90 minutes. Some people have 2-hour commutes each way. And there's a whole industry dedicated to serving up ads and serving up websites to this commuting culture and population. You'll see these in Hawaii is quite famous, Leilea, Kaukau, and Hawaiian Airlines, Hanaho magazines. This is a great way to expose your products to visitors from Japan. Not necessarily cheap, but it does work. So depending on what your strategy is and what your product is, I could recommend these certainly. Just some miscellaneous notes. I think it would be very helpful if you could, for your products, there's many Japanese language bloggers that blog about Hawaii products and services. And if you can get in with some of these influencers, that could be extremely helpful. If you get to be very serious about a particular market, such as Japan, I would recommend getting a telephone number, a virtual number there with a service such as Ring Central, or there's others where it's say a Japanese number, and a Japanese customer could call that number and it could ring to you in Hawaii. It's quite cheap, some tens of dollars per month. My only hesitation with completely recommending this is that you definitely need somebody who can speak Japanese that'll answer the phone. We covered promotion summary. Just a list of best practices that I see. Perhaps the most familiar to me right now is I would like our companies in Hawaii to be using a corporate email structure and a domain. So for example, not Gmail, not Yahoo, but hypothetically HawaiiSunscreen.com or whatever happens to be your product. Invest in a domain. It's actually quite cheap to get. I'm talking to the tune of $20 a year or so. And then setting up an email address at that domain that's Japan at HawaiiSunscreen.com, for example. And the reason I like that is because it shows the Japanese consumer that they can send an email to this address, Japan at, and they can reasonably expect that somebody will reply and help them in the Japanese language. I think that that's critical. And maybe the other most important thing on here is getting out to these trade shows and getting in market and keeping your eyes wide open and learning as much as you can about the market. We're running out of time, so I'm going to jump through these and just make sure that you have a copy of this presentation later. But I break this out into a couple of best practice slides, talking about the best things that I see that somebody could do while operating in Japan, trying to sell products from Hawaii. And then this is what you could do while you're in Hawaii and targeting some consumers that are visiting Hawaii from Japan. I bring up that sales cycle for Hawaii visitors coming in. I'm happy to go through this with anybody in more detail if they'd like to do that one-on-one. Some resources that you've already seen here. Don't forget, we're lucky that if Japan happens to be your target market, don't forget we have the consulate in Japan, the Japanese consulate in Hawaii that can be quite helpful with some topics here. We have John Holman again, we talked about him earlier, of course, Jamie and DBEDT and others. And I certainly don't want to leave out our friends at the Hawaii Department of Agriculture, because they do a lot of things for Hawaii companies selling agricultural products overseas. And just some more resources here. Again, anything in blue is hot linked. So if you download my presentation later, you'll be able to click through on all of these. So again, thank you. If there's any questions, I'm sorry I had to blaze through that very quickly. Again, that's something I would try to spend a whole semester on these, but tried to do it in as close to a half an hour as possible. All right, I don't see any questions coming in, so I will close that. And I'm the last speaker today. So, oh wait, hold on, I see a Q&A. Bear with me. Nope, sorry. Let's see. Oh, the question is, where can we download the presentation? I'll be sending around an email to everyone that has a link to the Dropbox folder. It'll take a little while because I like to edit the video and get the video uploaded to our YouTube archive, and then send you out the notification of the video and where to download the presentations. But if you just bear with me 1 second, I'll go back to my beginning agenda. And if you look at the agenda, you can see here, if you have your phone on you right now, you can scan that QR code and it'll take you to the Dropbox folder where I have PDFs of these presentations. Okay, so with that, with no further questions, I will sign out. Say mahalo to everyone. Again, mahalo to DBEDT and SBA for the funding that allows us to put on these seminars and webinars and the one-on-one mentoring sessions. Aloha to my fellow Hawaii Pacific Export Council board members who helped a lot with the programming today, Dale Wright, Neale Rath, and Susan Utsugi, and John Holman. And thank you everyone for attending. I appreciate you being here. We're approaching 5 hours, which I know is a marathon event for a lot of you. So thanks very much. And we look forward to seeing you at some of our events later this year. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Rob. Mahalo, everyone.
Bye-bye.